Chapter 1688. Of course, Xiaohua was the only one who knew what he was thinking. He knew that he was dreaming. Fairy Chiyue was a nascent soul-stage senior and the lord of a city. How could she possibly communicate with a mere chi refining stage cultivator? It would be impossible for them to even meet once. Immediately, Xiaohua followed Sun Shu and the other two and picked a place to enter Chiyue City. However, when Xiaohua reached the gap between the boulders, there seemed to be no obstruction at all. Even his divine sense couldn't detect any obstruction. However, a very subtle thing swept past Xiaohua's body. This feeling was also the result of Xiaohua's Buddhist sense. Only his Buddhist sense could detect a trace of it. Moreover, Xiaohua's eyes turned a few times, and he hid this strange feeling in the bottom of his heart. When he walked through the gap between the boulders and entered Chiyue City, Xiaohua was still dumbfounded. It turned out that what the naked eye saw was far from the truth. The bustling and prosperous scene inside Chiyue City was completely different from what Xiaohua had seen outside the city. The figures and traces of the cultivators who had entered the city earlier were all illusions created by the formation. The real figures had long since disappeared. AI, it really is a great formation protecting the city. It's far from what I can guess with my current cultivation. Xiaohua secretly smiled and shook his head. Chiyue City was different from Jinghua City and Yinyuan City. All kinds of buildings were piled up with huge boulders and had a rough style. Even the streets inside the city were more than twice as wide as the other two cities. The shops on both sides of the street were equally wide. However, what was similar was the signboards of the shops and the smiling low-level cultivators standing in front of the shops. Two spirit beasts that were several times larger than camels were carrying an incomparably large flower carriage. The flower carriage was suspended in the air and was pulled by the spirit beasts. They quickly flew past Xiaohua and the others and quickly rushed to the end of the street. Xiaohua knew that these spirit beasts were the specialty of Chiyue City, spirit camels. They were powerful, fast, and most importantly, gentle. They were used to pull carriages and were quite similar to the flying feather beasts of Yinyuan City. While he was thinking, an empty car slowly came from afar. Qian Diheng took a step forward, stretched out his hand and called, "Buddy." There was a fourth layer chi refining cultivator sitting on top of the spirit camel pulling the carriage. When he saw someone blocking the carriage, he patted the protruding hump on the back of the spirit camel. The spirit camel raised its head and neighed before galloping towards Qian Diheng. "Let's go, junior brother Xiao. It's forbidden to fly in Chiyue City. It's a bit far for us to walk to the inn. Let's take the spirit camel carriage. After we get on the carriage, I'll tell you more." Qian Diheng turned around and explained to Xiaohua with a smile. However, before he could finish his words, a cultivator walked out of a shop about 3 meters to the left of Qian Diheng. When that cultivator saw the spirit camel carriage in front of him, he stepped on it without even looking at it. "Fellow Taoist, this carriage was called by the fellow Taoist in front. Please get off and wait for the next carriage." The cultivator driving the carriage didn't dare to drive the spirit camel. He looked at Qian Diheng and turned around to say to the cultivator who got on the carriage. Just as the cultivator spoke, another 6 or 7 cultivators walked out of the shop. They were all 10th layer chi refining cultivators. When these cultivators saw the cultivator in front of them get on the carriage, they all laughed and wanted to go up. Qian Diheng had already noticed this. His expression was very ugly. He coldly walked to the front of the spirit camel carriage and scolded, "This is the spirit camel carriage I called. How can you be the first to get on it? Hurry up and get off." This group of cultivators was stunned. The cultivators who didn't get on the carriage didn't matter. However, if the cultivators who got on the carriage got off, they would lose face. However, when they saw Qian Diheng's late 12th layer chi refining cultivation and the 3 people behind him, they couldn't help but hesitate. "What? You still don't want to get off?" Qian Diheng's sneer became even wider. "Humph, I got on the carriage first. I didn't see anyone calling for a carriage. Although your cultivation is high, you can't be unreasonable." When the cultivator who got on the carriage saw that there were people watching, he unconsciously became emboldened and stood up to shout. Then, he said to the cultivator driving the spirit camel, "I often walk around Chiyue City. I have sat in this fellow Taoist's spirit camel carriage before. Tell me, who got on your carriage first? Just as the owner of the spirit camel was hesitating, another cultivator walked out of the shop with joy on his face. This cultivator was holding something in his hand. When he saw the many cultivators in front of the spirit camel, he frowned. He looked around and saw Xiaohua and the others. However, at that moment, his eyes were filled with shock. Then a hint of ecstasy appeared on his face. He turned around and returned to the shop once more. However, Xiaohua and the others were looking at Qiandiheng and the cultivators on the spirit camel carriage with great interest. They didn't see the cultivator who came out of the shop at all. This fellow Taoist came first. Obviously, the owner of the spirit camel was intimidated by the cultivator. He cupped his hands and said to Qiandiheng with panic on his face, "Senior, I was dazzled and thought you were going to get on the carriage. Since you didn't, please look at the other carriages." With that, an empty spirit camel carriage came slowly from not far away. The cultivator driving the carriage was overjoyed. He quickly stood up from the spirit camel carriage and waved his arms while shouting. Unfortunately, what kind of temper did Qiandiheng have? As a disciple with a powerful background in the heavenly Thunder Palace, how could he give in so easily? What? A disciple of my Thunder Control sect was bullied by a 10th level Qi refining cultivator in Chiues City? Damn it. I'd like to see which famous sect dares to rob a disciple of my Thunder Control sect. Qiandiheng reached out his hand and grabbed the spirit camel carriage's nose and said angrily without looking at the empty carriage, Thunder Control sect? The cultivator driving the carriage turned pale. He quickly turned his head and bowed, saying, "Senior brother, can you go to the carriage in front?" Boy, Thunder Control sect? A trace of fear appeared on the faces of those cultivators. They unconsciously looked at each other in dismay. Haha, you're really a coward. How come? You retreat when you see a famous sect. You've become unreasonable even though you were reasonable. That's right. If it's I'll definitely not get off the carriage. Magic is forbidden in Chiues City. So what if you're a disciple of the Thunder Control sect? You have to be reasonable. It seemed that many cultivators had a lot of opinions about the famous sections. At this time, seeing the situation, they also added fuel to the fire. Humph, fellow brothers, others care about the Thunder Control sect. Why should we care about them? Come on, I'd like to see what the city guards of Chiues City do. The cultivator who had already got on the carriage sneered and called out. The cultivator driving the carriage turned even paler. He had to turn his head and beg Qiandiheng again. "Senior brother of the Thunder Control sect? No, martial uncle, please turn around. That spirit camel carriage is fast and stable. Haha, a bunch of cowards." Qiandiheng was angry. He used his strength to pull his hand. The spirit camel was pulled by him. It seemed to be in great pain. It tried its best to support itself and raised its hoof to lift Qiandiheng. The spirit camel fruit was indeed a spirit beast with great strength. Qiandiheng's hand shook and the spirit camel fruit broke free. Damn it! Qiandiheng was angry. His face was slightly red. He slapped his hand and was about to take out a magic tool from his storage bag. Sun Shu was shocked. He quickly stepped forward and held Qiandiheng's arm. He transmitted his voice, "Junior brother Qian, don't be angry." Ha ha ha. The other cultivators saw this and knew that Qiandiheng would not do anything. They laughed and began to board the carriage. The last cultivator glanced around and looked at the shop behind him with a strange expression. Hee, is that so? I heard that Chiues City does not allow the use of magic power to fight. Xiaohua smiled and stepped forward. He quickly grabbed the spirit camel fruit's hoof. The spirit camel fruit was obviously scared. It quickly pulled back. But in Xiaohua's hand, how could it struggle? Soon after, Xiaohua effortlessly grabbed the spirit camel's hoof and exerted a bit of force. The spirit camel screamed and lost its balance and fell to the ground. The owner of the spirit camel immediately jumped off the spirit camel's back. The carriage on the spirit camel's back was also tilted. Other than the first cultivator who forced himself to remain standing, the others also jumped off the spirit camel. The spirit camel fruit first lay down and then struggled to get up. Xiaohua stepped forward and pressed one hand on the spirit camel fruit's back. He sneered, I want to see if this spirit camel fruit, can it still carry people? Hiss. Seeing this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The spirit camel was a common thing in Weeping Moon City, and everyone knew how strong it was. Xiao Hua was able to subdue it with a single hand. So how strong was he? Of course, strength was secondary to cultivators. However, when magic power was not allowed to fight, strength was obviously superior. Io, where is senior brother Chong? Why hasn't he come out yet? The last cultivator looked around and shouted, Senior brother Chong? The others were also shocked. They exchanged glances and shouted to the cultivator who was still on the spirit camel fruit, Senior brother Chong. Senior brother Chong is still in the store. Is something wrong? Let's go in and take a look. Humph, fine. Senior Marshal Brother Tsong glared hatefully at Xiao Hua and the others and said, Weeping Moon City is a place of reason. If it weren't for my senior martial brother, this poor Taoist would never let this matter rest. After that, he jumped down from the spirit camel fruit and followed the others into the store. I want to see who is the one who won't let this matter rest. Qian Diheng clapped his hands and was about to follow the others in. Forget it. Sun Shu quickly stopped Qian Diheng. Don't lower yourself to the same level as these lowly cultivators. It will tarnish the reputation of our Imperial Thunder sect. Humph! Qian Diheng stomped his feet and was about to get on the spirit camel fruit. Why are you getting on this? Xiao Hua loosened his grip and let go of the spirit camel fruit. He pointed and said with a smile, Why don't you take the spirit camel fruit over there? Haha, that's right. Qian Diheng glanced at the cultivator who was standing next to the spirit camel fruit with a pitiful look. He laughed and got on the other spirit camel fruit. A pitiful person must have something to hate. Curran Fian concluded and got on the other spirit camel fruit as well. -8. Chapter 1689. The spirit camel carriage was very fast, and the Weeping Moon City was very big. Obviously, Qian Diheng already had a plan. After getting on the spirit camel carriage, he told the cultivator driving the carriage the name of an inn. Sun Shu blinked and didn't refute. The spirit camel carriage walked for an hour before arriving in front of a luxurious-looking inn. Qian Diheng took out spirit stones to pay the bill. Xiao Hua glanced at it and couldn't help but feel a little heartache. He didn't expect that riding the spirit camel carriage would actually cost so many spirit stones, but thinking about the half-hour journey, it would really be a headache. This heartache and this headache, it seemed that he had to choose the same. As for the accommodation, Qian Diheng was also generous. He asked for 4 rooms, 1 for each person. After waiting for the waiter to eagerly send the 4 people to their rooms, Xiao Hua took the magic tablet, looked at it casually, and threw it on the table in the room. He then sat cross-legged on the cloud bed, quietly waiting for Qian Diheng to come. Unexpectedly, after a long time, he still didn't see Qian Diheng's figure. Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel surprised. Could it be that senior martial brother Qian's personality has changed? At this time, footsteps came from outside the room, and Sun Shu's voice came. Junior martial brother Xiao, can I go in? Xiao Hua jumped up from the cloud bed and said with a smile, Senior martial sister Sun, please come in. The restriction of eyes room is not open. Sun Shu entered the room, looked around, and said apologetically, I originally wanted to book another inn in the Weeping Moon City, but I didn't expect junior martial brother Qian to insist on coming here. The conditions here are a little bad. I hope junior martial brother Xiao doesn't mind. Xiao Hua knew that Sun Shu came with a purpose, so he said with a smile, I'm just a loose cultivator, and I'm already very satisfied with these conditions. Senior martial sister Sun, what brings you here? Sun Shu nodded, looked around, and said with a sound transmission, although we came to the Weeping Moon City to deceive people, we still have to go to the Weeping Moon City's price negotiation. What I didn't tell you in detail before is that the Weeping Moon City's bargaining conference is quite unique. Many mystic instruments and even mystic treasures of unknown origin are brought here to be exchanged. Junior brother Qian must have chosen this place for the purpose of the bargaining conference. I have already made some inquiries, and it just so happens that there will be a price negotiation meeting in 3 days. If junior brother Xiao is interested, shall we go together? Hearing this, Xiao Hua's face lit up with joy. He clapped his hands and said, Good. This little brother hasn't come out to travel for a long time. I'm just looking for some good things to bring back. Then it's settled. Junior brother Xiao can cultivate here for the next few days, or you can go out and enjoy the scenery. In 3 days, I will come and get junior brother. Xiaohua nodded and said, Senior apprentice sister Sun arranged it very well. Little brother has no objections. Little brother is meditating in the room. When the time comes, I will wait for senior sister's call. Hee. Sun Shu covered his mouth and laughed. Junior brother Xiao is quite peaceful. I don't have to worry about him. There seemed to be a hidden meaning behind these words, and Xiao Hua's face turned red. However, after Sun Shu took a few steps, he turned back and said, Oh right, there is a special spirit herb in Sobbing Moon City that is used by Foundation establishment cultivators. Junior brother Xiao, if you have the time to go out and try your luck, you might be able to find something. Senior Sun is talking about the Elian green fruit, right? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Junior brother Xiao is quite knowledgeable. The climate near Sobbing Moon City is dry, and the Earth's spiritual energy is dense. It's a good opportunity for the Elian green fruit to grow. Many cultivators come to Sobbing Moon City for this special spirit fruit. Sun Shu said with a strange expression. After all, when Xiao Hua first went to the Feather Immortal Assembly with her, he didn't seem to know a lot of things. She was just reminding him out of kindness. She didn't expect Xiao Hua to read a lot of ancient books in these 5 years. Although he didn't travel, he still understood a lot. Xiao Hua scratched his head and didn't explain. He shook his head slightly. This Elian green fruit is good, but it's used to improve the structure of true essence. It's used for early-stage foundation establishment cultivators to break through. It doesn't seem to have any effect on aura-refining cultivators like us, right? Speaking up to here, Xiao Hua's heart was slightly moved. His cultivation was constantly improving, different from other 12th-layer aura-refining cultivators whose cultivation was stagnant. Would this Elian green fruit be useful to him? I just feel that although junior brother Xiao failed to build his foundation, with junior brother Xiao's aptitude, you can definitely build your foundation in the future. Didn't the ancients say? When the heavens are about to bestow a great responsibility on a great man, they must first torment his will, tire his muscles and bones, starve his body, empty his body, and disturb his actions, right? Junior brother Xiao only needs to be patient, and you can achieve what you can't. Foundation establishment, gold core, you can just raise your hand. Sun Shu stared at Xiao Hua with her beautiful eyes and said very sincerely. When Xiao Hua heard this, he also raised his head and looked at Sun Shu's gaze. He saw that her pure gaze was full of trust and didn't have the slightest trace of contempt. Xiao Hua said with a smile, Thank you, senior sister Sun. Junior brother definitely won't disappoint senior sister. And, junior brother Xiao, go ahead and cultivate. I'm leaving. Sun Shu's face inexplicably reddened. Her words were admittedly filled with trust in Xiao Hua, but they also contained encouragement. Seeing Xiao Hua's unparalleled self-confidence, who knew how many times stronger than the decadence of many cultivators who failed to build their foundation, her heart couldn't help but become slightly chaotic. After Sun Shu left, Xiao Hua sat on the cloud bed for a while, but he still didn't see Qian Diheng coming over. He couldn't help but feel anxious. In his storage pouch, he still had the 4-phase wheel, 100-layer cloud seal, MO cloud armor, and a spear-shaped magic tool. That magic tool and 4-phase wheel weren't as offensive as the cloud-suppressing seal, but the 100-layer cloud seal and MO cloud armor were defensive magic tools. In the cultivation world, defensive magic tools were much rarer than offensive magic tools. It was rare that Swallow Thunder Ridge, which was an inheritance of refining, could suddenly take out 2 defensive magic tools to deal with Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua didn't know that he could reforge magic tools in Weeping Moon City, but since he knew, how could he not have thoughts about it? After all, although Xiao Hua's current physical body was tough, it couldn't be compared to magic tools. Without a protective magic tool, wouldn't it be the same as not wearing a Taoist robe? However, when Xiao Hua arrived at Qian Diheng's room, Qian Diheng removed the restriction. After hearing Xiao Hua's request, Qian Diheng unconsciously smiled mysteriously and said, Junior brother Xiao, don't be anxious about this matter. We can't go anywhere at the same time. Anyway, there are still 3 days before the price negotiation. Let me explore the path first and figure out the twists and turns, Then I'll tell junior brother Xiao. What do you think? In. Junior brother understands? Xiao Hua nodded emotionally. He was also worried about how to take out magic tools in front of Qin. This arrangement was exactly what he wanted. Soon after, Xiao Hua returned to his room. Looking at the furnishings in the room, he knew that this place wasn't suitable for him to cultivate. Frowning, he took out the jade slip for refining tools and carefully studied it. After a long time, Xiao Hua didn't carefully calculate the time. He didn't know which part of the refining tool he saw, but Xiao Hua's heart was moved. He floated up from the cloud bed, took out a magic tablet, opened the restriction in the room, and walked out of the inn. Sir, where are you going? Seeing Xiao Hua come out of the high-priced room, the waiter waiting outside quickly came to greet him. Looking at the waiter's flattering face, Xiao Hua sighed in his heart. This waiter's cultivation base was at the second layer of the Qi refining realm. Several years ago, when he was in the Shang Huaming and Heaven Forsaken, he had always been pursuing the realm. But now, this second layer of the Qi refining realm wasn't even worthy of carrying his shoes. He could only be servile in front of him. The realm and cultivation that cultivators pursue are not without reason. Master's encouragement and supervision are also not wrong. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua recalled Wu Hin's encounter on Sky Thunder Peak. If it wasn't for him being worried, how could Wu Hin run from Myriad Thunder Valley to Sky Thunder Peak? Unfortunately, I'm a good-for-nothing disciple. I'll have to disappoint Master for a few years. Xiao Hua's gaze was somewhat erratic. Sir. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't answer, the waiter didn't dare to say anything else. He called out in a low voice and retreated to the side. Xiao Hua glanced at him and felt a trace of pity in his heart. It was as if he was looking at himself from several years ago. He patted his hand and took out a mid-grade spirit stone from his storage pouch. He handed it over and said with a smile, Waiter, I want to see a tool refining shop. Are there any good shops you recommend? There's no need for a spirit stone. The waiter didn't expect Xiao Hua to give him a spirit stone. He quickly declined and said with an apologetic smile, There's a shop in the east of the city called Luanji. It's a famous old shop in Chiues City. The shop's owner has 1,000 years of inheritance and is the most authentic. If Sir Daoist goes there, you can mention my name and it'll be 10% cheaper. Waiter, you sure know how to fool people. Who doesn't know that there's a shop in Chiues City? That shop is also close to here. You want this fellow Daoist to go to Luanji's shop. I'm afraid you have some selfish motives. A cultivator with a ruddy complexion just happened to walk out of the room. When he heard the waiter's words, he sneered. I'll let this Daoist know. The waiter's face immediately turned red and he quickly said, I do know the owner of Luanji's shop, but his things are really good. Although Chiues sect is close, their things are more than 30% more expensive than Luanji's. Everyone wants to go because of Chiues sect's signboard. But, no buts. The 10th layer Qi refining cultivator flicked his sleeve and said, I don't need to worry about their goods because of Chiues sect's signboard. Who knows what kind of background this Luanji has? Then, he cupped his hands towards Xiao Hua and said, Senior Martial Brother, I know the way to Chiu sect. May I have the honor of showing you the way? Xiao Hua looked at the blushing waiter and then at the eager cultivator. He smiled and said to the waiter, Brother waiter, you haven't told me your name yet, have you? How can I be taken care of if I go there? Brother waiter? When the waiter heard this, his expression became even more excited and he stuttered, I'm surnamed Fan, named Yi. I've been with Luanjiaming since I was young. Luanjiaming? When Xiao Hua heard this, he couldn't help but frown. Needless to say, this was definitely the owner of Luanji's shop. How high could his cultivation be if he grew up with Fan Yi? Haha, a second-layer Qi refining shopkeeper, what magic tools could he possibly refine? Fellow Daoist, you should go to Chiues sect. The cultivator laughed loudly. Luanjiaming is a waiter of Luanji's shop. Fan Yi knew he said something wrong and hurriedly explained. The shopkeeper of Luanji's shop is an elder from his clan, Luan Han. Hee, thank you, brother waiter. Xiao Hua waved his hand and the spirit stone floated in front of Fan Yi. Then, he left the shop without looking back. Fan Yi held the spirit stone in his hand and his eyes were filled with gratitude. At this moment, a faintly discernible speck of light quietly appeared in Xiao Hua's Buddha's heart. It appeared so ordinary that Xiao Hua didn't notice it at all. -8. Chapter 1690. Luanji store was indeed famous. Xiao Hua stopped a spirit camel carriage, and the driver immediately recognized the name. Xiao Hua didn't even need to say a fifth word. Of course, after the spirit camel carriage traveled for a full hour, Xiao Hua sat at the back of the carriage and looked at the scenery of sobbing Moon City to his heart's content. Only then did they arrive at a relatively quiet place. Although it was called quiet, it was actually a remote place with few people. It was far less lively than the inn. At the end of a street that wasn't very wide, there was a shabby shop that wasn't too big standing there alone. There was a big hammerhead sign hanging on it, similar to a workshop in the secular world. Xiao Hua looked around and shook his head. This kind of remote place, if it wasn't for Fan Ye's guidance, who would spin spirit stones to ride a spirit camel carriage here? Even if the 7 Skills sect's magic tools are a bit more expensive, I'm afraid I can still take advantage of this little bit of spirit stones. However, the 7 Skills sect had chased after Xiao Hua to kill him. Xiao Hua had always disliked the 7 Skills sect, so how could he take care of their business? I won't even give half a spirit stone to the 7 Skills sect. Xiao Hua curled his lips and walked toward Luanji's store. At the same time, Xiao Hua's appearance also changed slightly. When he arrived in front of Luanji's store, he had already used the stealing the sky technique to change into another person. Luanji's store was quite big. All kinds of coarse materials were placed in different places. In the middle of the store was a very strange 5-star shaped counter. In the middle of the counter, a short and fat cultivator was actually sitting there and taking a nap. Yes, he was taking a nap. When Xiao Hua saw this, he almost rubbed his eyes. Which cultivator didn't cultivate diligently in order to break through before the end of their lifespan? Even if they didn't make any progress, they still racked their brains to find a chance. He had never seen anyone napping during the day. Cough, cough. Xiao Hua stepped into the store and coughed twice. He released his divine sense and carefully observed the materials. Huff, huff. Xiao Hua's coughing not only didn't wake the fat man up, but also caused him to snore. Damn it! If I were to do that, wouldn't Master have flown into a rage? Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and was too lazy to pay attention to him. He simply walked around the shop. Whenever he saw something he liked, he would reach out his hand and take the material in his hand, carefully observing it. Xiao Hua had read through most of the jade slips regarding the refining of tools in Swallow Thunder Ridge. He had never truly practiced the Tao of refining, so it was hard to say how good he was. But in terms of identifying materials, Xiao Hua was full of confidence. After he finished looking through the items in the store, he couldn't help but nod to himself. Fan Yu was right. The items in this store were indeed not bad. Not only was there a variety of items, but the quality was also excellent. Alas, cultivators are actually the same as mortals. They all care about fame. Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat and he thought, moreover, the fragrance of wine is afraid of being hidden deep in the alleys. This Luanji store has some background, but its reputation can't compare to 7 Skills sects. Moreover, it's located in such a remote place. How can it be popular? Soon after, Xiao Hua raised his head again. He saw that there were more than 10 partitions on the pentagonal counter. Each partition had some grids. The grids were of different sizes, and there were some small objects that looked like Dharma treasures, but weren't Dharma treasures. When Xiao Hua's gaze fell on a small object that looked like a peacock, his heart trembled and he couldn't help but walk over. That grid didn't have any fluctuations of spiritual energy, so it probably didn't have any restrictions. Xiao Hua didn't even think about it and grabbed at the air. The peacock flew out of the grid, however. As soon as the peacock jumped out of the grid, a spark flew out from each of the 5 corners of the 5-star-shaped platform. These 5 sparks were also special. They were actually separated into 5 different colors and flew towards Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua was startled. Although the sparks were small, they were extremely powerful. With a sweep of his divine sense, he saw that the 5 sparks were rapidly absorbing the 5 elements' spiritual energy. They grew larger and larger. By the time they reached Xiao Hua, they had already condensed into the size of a wicker basket. 5 different colors rapidly revolved within it, aiming straight for Xiaohua's chest. Hee, Xiaohua smiled. He stretched out his left hand and used an ice seal to seal the fireball. However, the instant the seal sealed the fireball fiercely expanded and absorbed the ice seal's magic power. Soon after, with a pong sound, it exploded. Xiaohua's expression changed when he saw this. His right hand didn't dare to be negligent. He grabbed at the air again and sealed the exploding fireball. Soon after, an explosive force came from his right hand. Xiaohua's hand shook twice before it gradually disappeared. Damn it, what kind of fireball is this? It's so powerful. Even a 12th layer qi refining cultivator might not be able to completely control it. Xiaohua muttered in his heart. Where did this little thief come from? Only now did the sweaty fatty wake up. He didn't have time to wipe away the sparkling saliva at the corner of his mouth. When he saw Xiaohua's young appearance, he immediately shouted. At the same time, he slapped his storage pouch and took out several yellow talismans. He looked around in a somewhat flustered manner. Xiaohua looked thoughtfully at the chaotic spiritual energy in his right hand and said, "Fellow Taoist, don't panic. I was just looking around." Looking around? You can touch other people's things just by looking around? The fatty said casually. He seemed to still be a bit sleepy. Jamming? How can you be so impudent? A rebuke came from behind the shop. An 11th layer qi refining middle-aged cultivator quickly walked out. The fatty woke up at this moment and looked at Xiaohua. It would have been better if he didn't look, but when he did, he was shocked. He quickly threw the yellow talisman into his storage pouch and bowed. Junior Luan Jiaming greets Senior. That respectful look on his face showed that his attitude was very proper. Hee, you're the Luan Jiaming that Fanny spoke of? Xiaohua said with a smile. It must be hard on you to be able to sleep in the middle of the day. Luan Jiaming's face was flushed red. He mumbled something but didn't know what to say. Fellow Taoist was recommended by Fanny. The cultivator who came later stepped forward and saluted. I, Luan Han, greet fellow Taoist. Fanny is quite considerate. Fellow Taoist, take a look. All materials, magic tools, and so on, I will give fellow Taoist a discount. Hee, Xiaohua smiled and nodded. He pointed at the pentagonal counter and asked, Let's not talk about other things first. I want to know what's going on with that fireball that contained the qi of the 5 elements. Oh, as expected, fellow Taoist has a good divine ability. Hearing Xiaohua's question, Luan Han's face also showed a trace of respect. This is my Luan Ji's ancestral frigid flame. If you're not at the foundation establishment stage, you absolutely can't easily extinguish it. Frigid flame? Xiaohua slightly furrowed his brows. He carefully recalled, but didn't seem to have any impression. Hee, what a pity. By Ai's generation, most of the frigid flame had already been lost. It can only be used to refine tools. But according to ancient legends, this flame is the flame seed of the celestial world's heavenly fire. At its peak, it has the ability to destroy heaven and earth. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't know, Luan Han proudly explained. -8. Chapter 1691. Heavenly Flame Seed? When Xiaohua heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. The heavenly flame of the immortal world was something from legends. He already felt that it was amazing that he could control the true Samadhi fire. But this Luan family actually had a heavenly flame seed? This was truly hilarious. However, this fireball's power is really great. Although it might not be a heavenly flame seed, it's still very powerful. If I want to refine tools in the future, I'm afraid I'll need this kind of flame. Xiaohua muttered to himself. However, after thinking about it carefully, the corner of Xiaohua's mouth revealed a faintly discernible smile. Fellow Taoist, are you interested in this doll? Luan Han waved his hand, and a strange spell was cast on the counter. The small peacock flew up and stopped in front of Luan Han. Luan Han stretched out his index finger and tapped the peacock's back. The peacock raised its head and let out a clear cry before spreading its wings and flying in the air. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the peacock retracted its wings and flew back into Luan Han's hand. Fellow Taoist, what do you think of this peacock? Luan Han said with a smile, This is something young female cultivators like the most. If fellow Taoist has a dual cultivation partner, him, or children, you can buy it for them. It's the best gift. Seeing Xiaohua frown, Luan Han rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "This doll refining technique is unique to my Luanji shop. 7 skills sect can't do it. If fellow Taoist is interested and you were introduced by Fanyi, I will give you a discount of 30% of the spirit stones." Xiaohua glanced at Luan Han, but his gaze didn't fall on the peacock in his hand. He shook his head and said, "Fanyi told I that this Luanji shop is an old shop in Weeping Moon City. It's the real deal. If it wasn't for bad luck, it would definitely be more famous than 7 Skills Sect's shop. But now, sigh, why did it only end up in the predicament of selling dolls?" Luan Han's expression changed slightly and his eyes narrowed. Then, he smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you're wrong. Haven't you heard of the saying in the secular world? A poor man's ambition. Although my Luanji shop can refine powerful magic tools, what's the use if no one visits? Dolls? Although it's just for fun, it can earn spirit stones for my Luanji shop. If I don't sell this, do you think I'm going to sell beads? Besides, even though my Luanji store has a good foundation, it also depends on the customer's taste. Furthermore, the predicament that my Luan shop is in isn't something that an outsider can see with a single glance." As Luan Han spoke, he placed the peacock back into the box, his tone slightly cold. "Haha," Xiaohua chuckled and said, "I didn't know that fellow Taoist Luan was also someone who didn't like to be under others. Could it be that fellow Taoist is this kind of person?" Luan Han was a little angry in his heart. He actually did not ask for Xiaohua's name. Xiaohua ignored Luan Han's anger. He looked around and said, "I didn't come here to debate with fellow Taoist Luan. I have a business deal to discuss with fellow Taoist Luan. I wonder if fellow Taoist Luan has any objections?" "Haha, I am a businessman. Why would I give away the spirit stones that are delivered to my door?" Luan Han laughed. He waved his hand at Luan Jiaming, who was a little panicked, and said, "Jiaming, serve fellow Taoist some tea." "Yes, disciple understands." Luan Jiaming welcomed him and prepared to go out from the counter. "I wonder what fellow Taoist has taken a fancy to?" Luan Han smiled apologetically. Xiaohua extended his hand and pointed at the materials in the store for artifact refinement. He said, "I want to purchase some of the materials in your store. How about the price?" "All of the materials?" Luan Han's face lit up as he asked. Xiaohua nodded. "Jamming, serve fellow Taoist good tea." Luan Han raised his head and ordered Luan Jiaming, who was about to enter the backyard. "Yes, disciple understands." Luan Jiaming saw that there was a big customer and was overjoyed in his heart. He responded loudly, "Fellow Taoist wants to refine your own artifacts?" Luan Han turned his head and smiled apologetically. That's right." Xiaohua replied in a while, "I still have something to ask fellow Taoist Luan. I hope you won't be stingy with your guidance." Sure. Luan Han smiled and took out a storage pouch from the counter. With a wave of his hand, many materials were stored inside. Fellow Taoist Luan, why aren't you negotiating with I?" Xiaohua was stunned. He was still preparing to haggle with the other party. Yet Luan Han smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist is a 12th level Qi refinement cultivator. Do you still lack spirit stones? I am underestimating fellow Taoist's status by negotiating with fellow Taoist." Xiaohua blinked his eyes. Looking at this cultivator who just said that poor people have short ambition, he didn't know how to answer. After Luan Han took some of the materials of various colors and handed them to Xiaohua, he asked, "Fellow Taoist, are these materials enough?" Xiaohua looked and smiled. "Fellow Taoist Luan, you should tell me the price first. Let's see if I have enough spirit stones in my storage pouch." Luan Han slightly nodded and transmitted a number to Xiaohua. And not bad. What Fanyi said was right. This Luan Han's character is really good. Hearing the price, Xiaohua thought inwardly. Just as he was about to take out the spirit stones, his heart moved again. He smiled and said, "These materials aren't enough. Fellow Taoist Luan, take 3 more. I will also triple the spirit stones." Okay. Luan Han was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist is so straightforward. I won't be unreasonable. Fellow Taoist only needs 2.5 more spirit stones. As he spoke, he took out more materials and handed them to Xiaohua. At this time, Luan Jiaming served the spirit tea. Seeing that the materials in the store were much less, he was also happy and was much more respectful to Xiaohua. Xiaohua took a sip of the spirit tea and praised. He put the spirit stones in his storage pouch and handed them to Luan Han. Luan Han's divine sense swept over and knew that the number of spirit stones was not small. He smiled from ear to ear and said, "Fellow Taoist, this spirit tea is unique to my Weeping Moon City. If fellow Taoist likes it, I will give it to you." Then, he ordered Luan Jiaming to go back to the backyard to get the spirit tea. "No need, no need." Xiaohua hurriedly stopped him. He put away the materials and said, "I still have something to discuss with fellow Taoist Luan. I just need fellow Taoist Luan to tell me everything you know." "Sure. What questions does fellow Taoist have?" Luan Han said with a smile. He was an expert in refining, so he was not afraid to ask about it. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "I's Grandmaster has a very special material. Divine sense can't control it, and it's very heavy. Ordinary cultivators can't pick it up. Well, the Grandmaster has said that this material is not a demonic tool. He wants to refine this material into a special magic weapon. Does fellow Taoist Luan have any ideas? A material that can't be controlled with divine sense? And it's very heavy?" Luan Han was stunned. He closed his eyes and thought for a moment. He shook his head slightly and said, "I don't seem to have encountered this situation." Xiaohua's face was slightly disappointed. He glanced at the pentagonal table and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist's ancestral frigid flame. Won't work?" "Oh, of course." Luan Han was enlightened. He patted his forehead and said with a smile, "I can't do it, but my frigid flame can burn everything. The material fellow Taoist mentioned is definitely not a problem. Fellow Taoist Luan, are you sure you can do it?" Xiaohua's eyes were also filled with joy. He said, "If possible, I will return to the mountain and ask Grandmaster to come over." When Luan Han heard that Xiaohua wanted to ask Grandmaster to come over, he immediately hesitated. If nothing unexpected happened, the Grandmaster of an aura refining cultivator should be a core formation cultivator. That was someone the Luan clan could not offend. How could they dare to ask a core formation cultivator to come personally? While Luan Han was hesitating, Xiaohua's brows slightly wrinkled. He seemed to have sensed something and his Buddhist sense swept outside. Xiaohua's expression immediately became wonderful. At this time, Luan Han made up his mind. He raised his head and said, "I can't be sure about this matter. I still have to ask the Grandmaster to make a decision later." "That's for the best." Xiaohua raised his brows and said with a smile, "Then how about I accompany fellow Taoist Luan to see the Grandmaster together?" "Oh?" Luan Han was even more surprised. But when he thought about how Xiaohua had just bought so many materials, he still nodded and said, "Since fellow Taoist has such intentions, then please." Soon after, Xiaohua followed Luan Han into the rear courtyard. Just as Xiaohua's figure disappeared from inside the shop, 3 cultivators came in through the door of Luanji's shop. 1 man and 2 women. The man looked to be in his 40s or 50s and was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. The 2 women looked to be in their 20s or 30s and were also in the 12th layer of the aura refining realm. The female cultivator at the front entered side by side with the male foundation building cultivator. Their behavior was very intimate. The female cultivator at the back had a dull expression, but when her gaze swept past Xiaohua's disappearing figure, she couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Why is this person's figure so familiar? Xiaohua. But soon after, the female cultivator smiled bitterly and shook her head. Xiaohua probably died long ago on Xiaoyu continent. Seniors. When Luan Jiaming saw that there were actually foundation building cultivators coming over, he was bewildered. He promptly went to greet them and received them very respectfully. Xiaohua followed Luan Han into the rear courtyard. They walked through a layer of courtyards and arrived in front of a small house. Luan Han respectfully saluted and said, "Martial Uncle, disciple Luan Han requests an audience." After a long while, an aged voice echoed, "Luan Han, do you need something? Didn't I tell you before? Family matters. Go find someone else as soon as possible. This old man doesn't have much time left. I still have to cultivate in seclusion. This. Luan Han glanced at Xiao Hua very awkwardly and replied as respectfully as before. Disciple met an honored guest today. This honored guest brought his core formation master to ask Disciple about a matter. Disciple didn't dare to take matters into his own hands. This time, Martial Uncle, please dispel my doubts. Right, I still haven't asked for fellow Taoist's name. Luan Han asked in a low voice. I am Zhang Hua. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Alas, come in. Hearing that it was a matter related to core formation cultivators, Luan Han's martial uncle didn't dare to neglect and said with a sigh, Fellow Taoist Zhang, please. Luan Han raised his hand and gestured. Xiao Hua also wasn't polite and entered the small house. The inside of the small house was somewhat dusky and also didn't have too many furnishings. There was a bookshelf on the wall. On the bookshelf were several books and also several jade slips. In the innermost part of the small house was a cloud bed. On top of it was a white-haired old man with extremely many wrinkles on his face. He was sitting cross-legged, and his cultivation was at the early stage of foundation establishment. -8. Chapter 1692. Seeing such an old foundation establishment cultivator, Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then immediately stepped forward and bowed, sending a voice transmission. Junior Zhang Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect greets Senior Luan. Imperial Thunder Sect? Hearing Xiao Hua announce his name, the Foundation Establishment cultivator was stunned, and a trace of light flashed across his eyes. He also sat up straight, flicked his sleeves, and sent a sound transmission with an aged voice. I am Luan Qing, and have already stopped asking about the old affairs of the clan. I wonder what little friend Zhang has to ask? Luan Han heard Xiao Hua's voice transmission and unconsciously frowned. Luan Han, there's a foundation establishment cultivator in the shop. You should go greet him. Jamming is too young. I'm afraid he can't handle it. Luan Qing instructed. Luan Han naturally knew there was a foundation establishment cultivator coming, so he stood up and said, Disciple will go now. Fellow Zhang, please excuse me. When Luan Han left the hut, Luan Qing pointed her finger, and a light flashed, activating the restriction in the hut. Little friend Zhang, if you have something to say, please say it. Luan Qing raised her head and stared at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua repeated what he had told Luan Han before and said with an apologetic smile, this thing was found in a dangerous place by martial ancestor. He knew it had great use, but he didn't know how to refine it. Even the Imperial Thunder Sect's artifact refining grandmasters couldn't think of a way. Junior came out to travel this time with the intention of helping martial ancestor find a suitable method. Just now, in the shop of Luanji, I saw the frigid flame. This time, I boldly asked Senior to enlighten me. Can this frigid flame temper this strange thing? Alas, I'm afraid it can't. Luan Qing slightly shook her head. She stretched out her hand, and a huge ball of 5-colored flame appeared in the center of her palm, swallowing the surrounding 5-element spiritual energy. But the strange thing was, Xiao Hua didn't feel any heat. Little friend Zhang, take a look. This frigid flame is admittedly the refining flame of my Luanji, but its power is already far inferior to before. It's certainly more than enough to refine ordinary magic tools, but it's beyond the power to refine elementary magic treasures. Not to mention the special material of your sect's martial ancestor. According to what this old man has seen and heard, that material must be something from beyond the heavens. It is very likely to be something from beyond the heavens of the demon realm. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to be so heavy and uncontrollable by divine sense. For this kind of material, we can only use demonic flames, or the refining methods of the demon realm. There is no other way. Demonic fire? The refining method of the devil realm. Xiao Hua's heart shook. That's right, Xiao Hua had thought for a long time, but he had never considered the demon realm. The Great Wisdom Heavy Sword was similar to a demon weapon, so the demon realm's refining method would naturally have an effect on it. But where was the devil realm? How could he, a cultivator from the human realm, go to the devil realm? For Xiao Hua, this seemed to be something impossible. Could it be that there's no other way? Xiaohua pondered for a moment and asked in a low voice. Haha. Luan Qing laughed and said, according to this old man's thoughts, other than the methods of the devil realm, there seems to be a legendary method of refining one's heart. However, your sect is one of the most famous sects in the country of Shi. Perhaps your sect's Qi refining grandmaster knows the method of refining one's heart. Since they can't do anything about it, this old man will only make a fool of himself. The method of refining one's heart. Xiaohua secretly noted it down. The refining jade slip he obtained from Swallow Thunder Ridge didn't mention the method of refining one's heart. He also didn't know whether Swallow Thunder Ridge had the method of refining one's heart. Other than the method of refining one's heart? Xiaohua still didn't give up. Luan Qing blinked and said with a smile, other than the method of refining one's heart, perhaps my Luan family's frigid death flame can reach Deshang. Xiaohua's eyes flashed and he said with a smile, why can't the frigid death flame reach Deshang? It's a long story, Luan Qing said with a smile, not to mention that my Luan family's frigid death flame has been damaged for a long time. The number of disciples who can practice this fire art is also very few. Sigh, forget it, this is my Luan family's ancestral inheritance. It's not worth telling outsiders. Seeing Luan Qing brush her sleeve and unwilling to say more, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, since no one in the Luan family can successfully practice this frigid death flame, then, Senior Luan, this frigid death flame's fire art, can you part with it? Luan Qing stared blankly, then a severe light flashed in her eyes. Staring at Xiaohua for a moment, she said with a sneer, little friend Zhang, I respect you as a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, that's why I'm talking to you nicely. This frigid death flame's fire art is my Luan family's ancestral inheritance. If I give it to you, how can my Luan family establish itself in Xiaoyu continent? Haha, Xiaohua wasn't afraid of Luan Qing and said with a smile, if it's the Luan family's secret art, if it's the secret art that the Luan family relies on to establish itself, how can it be used in Luan family's shop? Only for defensive arrays? Senior Luan, this junior is sincerely making a deal with Senior. If Senior has any conditions, please feel free to state them. If Junior is able to agree, I'll definitely agree without hesitation. This, Xiaohua's words hit Luan Qing's soft spot. That's right, the frigid death flame has been used in arrays. What's there to talk about keeping it a secret? However, Luan Qing still shook her head. Where it's used is my Luan family's business. Little friend Zhang doesn't have the qualifications to say. Hee, I feel that the reason why things in this world are things is because there are things of equivalent value that can be exchanged. Senior Luan isn't willing to exchange. Is it because you think that I's cultivation is insufficient and can't take out something of equivalent value to the frigid death flame? Xiaohua didn't beat around the bush and directly said. Luan Qing's gaze flickered, but she didn't say a word. Seeing this, Xiaohua secretly rejoiced. Since she didn't say anything, that means there's room to bargain. Thinking for a moment, Xiaohua extended his hand. A cluster of Samadhi true fire was born from the palm of his hand. That pure purple flame had a trace of scarlet. Samadhi true fire? Luan Qing clearly knew what it was and cried out in surprise, little friend Zhang, you're only at the Qi refinement realm. How can you use Samadhi true fire? Hee, this is naturally a bit of Junior's privacy. Xiaohua said with a smile, however, in order to express my sincerity with Senior, I have no choice but to let Senior take a look. Luan Qing took a deep breath and said, little friend Zhang wants to exchange the fire technique of Samadhi true fire and the secret to using fire techniques at the Qi refinement realm with my Luan clan? I won't hide it from Senior. Junior's physique is special. That's why I'm able to use Samadhi true fire at the Qi refinement realm. There's no secret to this. What Junior can exchange is only the fire technique of Samadhi true fire, Xiaohua said without hiding anything. Hearing this, Luan Qing shook her head. Samadhi true fire's fire technique is indeed rare, but a beginner Samadhi true fire can't be used to refine weapons. Even if it can be used to refine weapons in the future, it may not be comparable to my Luan family's frigid death flame. But Junior's fire technique of Samadhi true fire is complete, Xiaohua said with a smile. Luan Qing thought for a moment, but still shook her head. Hee, Samadhi true fire's fire technique should already be comparable to frigid Death Flame's fire technique. Xiaohua said with a smile, however, since Senior Ling still wants to bargain, how about adding this thing? As he spoke, Xiaohua took out another item. -8. Chapter 1693. Luan Qing's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt. Looking at the jade box that Xiaohua handed over, he really couldn't think of what Xiaohua could take out that could move his heart. Senior Luan, don't you want to open it and take a look? Xiaohua's jade box had a restriction that isolated spiritual sense, so Luan Qing couldn't see through it with his foundation establishment cultivation. Hee, this old man wants to see. Little friend Zhang is so confident. This jade box must have. Luan Qing took it with a smile and opened the jade box while speaking. When he saw what was inside the jade box, he couldn't help but exclaim, Mother and Child Spirit Fruit. 1,000-year-old mother and child spirit fruit. Indeed, in that jade box, a mother and child spirit fruit with golden runes faintly flowing on its surface was peacefully lying there. The golden runes also indicated the age of this mother and child spirit fruit. Looking at Luan Qing's surprised expression, Xiaohua snickered in his heart. Ever since he gave the 1,000-year-old mother and child spirit fruit to eldest senior brother Xiangyang, he had a plan in his heart. Because with the improvement of his cultivation, the age of the various spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits in the space also increased every day. If he didn't pick them diligently, he was afraid that each spiritual herb would be over 10,000 years old. These 10,000 years old things were certainly good, but it was quite dangerous to trade them. Therefore, Xiaohua treated the mother and child spirit fruit the same as other rare spiritual herbs. He divided the area according to the age of 500 years, 1,000 years, and so on. Every once in a while, he would pick them once to ensure that all the spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits of each age were preserved. Although the mother and child spirit fruit was different from other spiritual fruits, Xiaohua had kept it in the jade box for thousands of years. And now, the one in the space was already thousands of years old. Senior Luan, this mother and child spirit fruit was obtained by my master in an auction. One of them has already been taken by my 14th senior brother, who broke through the bottleneck of the early stage of foundation establishment. This spiritual fruit was given to this junior by my master to be used for future breakthroughs. Xiaohua waited for Luan Qing's surprise to fade a little, then said with a smile, however, this junior is still some distance away from foundation establishment. How can I break through the early stage of foundation establishment? What's more, master's matter is a big deal. If I can use this thing to exchange for the fire art and solve master's problem, why can't I break through my bottleneck? Luan Qing stared into Xiaohua's eyes, his gaze flickering. After a short moment, he glanced at the mother-child spirit fruit and said in a deep voice, this old man has been stuck at the bottleneck of the early stage of foundation establishment for several decades. 20 years ago, I already took the Origin Splendor pill. Young friend Zhang, do you think this old man still has a chance? Xiaohua knew that the Essence Splendor pill was a medicinal pill used by early foundation establishment cultivators to break through their barriers. It was concocted from bright flower fruit, essence returning grass, Lian green fruit, Dan He, and other rare spiritual plants. Among them, Dan He was the rarest, but it was also the most important. However, it was also the least used. Of course, he didn't know if eldest senior brother Xiangyang had taken it or not, but since Weeping Moon City had the Lian green fruit, it was normal for Luan Qing to have taken the Huayuan pill. Therefore, Xiaohua smiled and said, my 14th senior brother has also taken the Huayuan pill. Since he could use the mother-child spirit fruit to break through the bottleneck, Senior Luan should be able to do so as well. Of course, as for whether Senior Luan can really do it, this junior can't guarantee. Xiaohua's voice had just fallen when suddenly, a murderous intent came from where Luan Qing was. Xiaohua's eyes narrowed slightly. He glanced at Luan Qing's hands that were hidden in his Taoist robe. His expression didn't change as he chuckled and said, this is this junior's bottom line. This junior sincerely wants to help martial ancestor. If Senior Luan isn't willing, then this junior won't force it. Oh, right. I heard from the senior brother in the inn that there is a mysterious place in Weeping Moon City that can repair magic tools and magic weapons. Presumably, They also have a fire art similar to Ling Yi's Zhuhua. After this junior and senior brother repair the magic weapons, this junior can also make a deal with them. Presumably, this is also okay, right? Facing an early Foundation establishment cultivator at such a close distance, to be honest, Xiaohua wasn't the slightest bit afraid. After the battle with Zhang Hao and Zhen Ming, he had incomparable confidence in his Zhu Ming. Even an early Foundation establishment cultivator of the Imperial Thunder School couldn't avoid it. How could a Foundation establishment cultivator of the Luan family be his opponent? Looking at Xiaohua's confident words, and then looking at Xiaohua's eyes that didn't have the slightest trace of panic, Luan Qing's killing intent suddenly became discouraged. A kind of absurd feeling arose spontaneously, as if this cultivator of the 12th layer of qi refining could easily kill him, even if he had already set up a powerful restriction around the hut. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, Luan Qingkai suddenly smiled, and his killing intent was extinguished. He said, "Little friend Zhang is indeed a filial person. For the sake of your master, you actually gave up the opportunity to break through to the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. Since that's the case, how can this old man not help you?" As he said this, he waved his sleeve and the jade box disappeared. A trace of a smile appeared on Xiaohua's face. He took out the jade slip that recorded the Samadhi True Fire from his space and handed it to Luan Qing. He said, "Junior obtained this from a cultivator. It doesn't have much to do with my Imperial Thunder School. Senior Luan, please feel free to use it." Good. Luan Qing was overjoyed. He took it and scanned it with his divine sense. He nodded. This Samadhi True Fire is complete. In the past, this old man also obtained one, but it was abnormally damaged and couldn't be used. After Luan Qing put away the Samadhi True Fire art, he took out a rather old jade slip and handed it over. He said, "This is the Ling Yi fire art that this old man comprehended. It contains this old man's understanding. Little friend Zhang, please take it." "Many thanks, Senior Luan." Xiaohua was somewhat surprised. He didn't expect Luan Qing to be so generous. Taking out the jade slip, Xiaohua casually scanned it and stored it in his space. He knew Luan Qing wouldn't deceive him with false information. "What? Little friend Zhang, won't you look carefully?" A trace of a strange smile appeared on Luan Qing's face. "There's no need, right?" Xiaohua was slightly dazed. Yet Luan Qing shook his head. "Little friend Zhang should still look carefully? Otherwise, if there's any mishap and little friend Zhang returns to the Imperial Thunder sect to denounce us, my Luan family won't be able to bear it." Hearing these words, Xiaohua's heart suddenly thumped. Not good. Sure enough, when he took out the jade slip again and looked carefully for a moment, a trace of gloominess appeared on his face. "I didn't expect. This Ling Yi fire art is actually different from the Samadhi True Fire." Xiaohua was endlessly regretful in his heart. A trace of bitterness appeared in his mouth. The Samadhi True Fire is an ethereal fire. The fire art that uses the Samadhi True Fire can be created on its own. But this Ling Yi fire is a fire of the 5 elements. It can't be created out of thin air. It must have a flame seed. In other words, a flame seed. Sigh, didn't Luan Han say it just now? His Luan family's Ling Yi fire is the flame seed of the immortal realm. I'm afraid that's the meaning behind it, right? I thought that I was infallible and exchanged fire arts with others. Not to mention that I suffered a loss in the fire art. Even that 1,000-year-old child mother spirit fruit was given away to others for nothing. No wonder. Luan Qing wanted me to look clearly, and no wonder Luan Qing could easily take out the Luan family's ancestral fire art to exchange. Seeing the regret on Xiaohua's face, Luan Qing smiled and said, "Little friend Zhang, did you understand?" Haha. Suddenly, Xiaohua smiled and put away the jade slip. He said, "Reporting to Senior Luan, Junior already understood. This is all Junior's recklessness. It can't be blamed on Senior Luan." Good. Luan Qing's face revealed a strange expression. He clapped his hands and said, as expected of a disciple of a famous sect, "Only now do I truly believe in little friend Zhang." As he spoke, Luan Qing slapped his forehead. A speck of 5-colored fire flew out from his glabella and landed in Luan Qing's palm. This is a speck of the fire seed that I painstakingly cultivated. Although little Frinjong only exchanged fire arts, without this fire seed, that fire art is just trash. Little Frinjong took so many things to exchange for the fire art, but you suffered a big loss. Wanqing smiled and said, Little Frinjong is so magnanimous. How can I cherish it? Otherwise, even if you took the child mother's spirit fruit, it would be impossible to break through the bottleneck. Finished speaking, he pointed his finger. That five-colored fire flew in front of Xiao Hua's eyes. His eyes watched the 5 colors of the 5-colored fire faintly circulate. A burst of joy emerged in Xiao Hua's heart. He opened his mouth and that fire was immediately absorbed into his body. Luan Qing was startled. He didn't expect Xiao Hua to be able to absorb the icicle flame into his body so easily. This kind of absorption method was commonly used by foundation establishment or golden core cultivators to absorb magic treasures. Perhaps what I said about magic treasures just now wasn't false. Luan Qing had a trace of lingering fear. At the same time, he rejoiced that he reined in the horse at the precipice in time. Thus, Luan Qing's eyes turned and he said, Little Frinjong, I still have something to remind Little Frinjong. Senior Luan, please speak. Junior is all ears. Xiao Hua was in a great mood and said with a smile, My Luan family's icicle flame is extremely powerful. According to ancient legends, it's the fire seed of the immortal realm's fire. Luan Qing organized his thoughts and said, But now Little Frinjong has also seen it. Right now, my Luan family's icicle flame can only be used for refining. It's even used for setting up formations. It really doesn't match its reputation. The name of the immortal realm's fire seed has already become a joke in the Dawn Rain continent. Xiao Hua slightly nodded. He didn't have any expectations for this icicle flame. He only wanted to use it for refining, especially to temper the Great Wisdom Sword. As for whether or not it was the fire seed of the immortal realm's fire seed, he didn't care. The reason why it ended up like this is also related to the cultivation of the icicle flame. Luan Qing said again, I believe that Little Frinjong has already somewhat understood. The cultivation of this icicle flame is completely a process of cultivation. You must have a fire seed in order to cultivate your own icicle flame. And this fire seed directly determines the power and quality of the icicle flame. According to my Luan family's records, when the Luan family was at its peak, my icicle flame had the ability to destroy the heavens and earth. Even the so-called large sects at that time had to avoid it. And as time passed, my Luan family's fire seed became weaker and weaker, and also more and more disorderly. Naturally, its power also became more and more unbearable. -8. Chapter 1694. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the door to Luan Qing's hut opened, and an expressionless Xiao Hua came out. He then turned around, bowed deeply, and followed a boy who had been waiting outside for a long time to walk to the front of Luan's shop. As he walked, Xiao Hua pondered. Senior Luan said clearly that this frigid flame relies entirely on the original flame. If I use the flame he gave me to cultivate it, I can naturally produce my own frigid flame. Of course, this frigid flame can also be used to refine tools, but it will lose a lot of its magical powers. But when it comes to magical powers, Senior Luan is vague, as if he himself doesn't understand. This is strange. But what if I don't use Senior Luan's flame? Where would I go to find the flame of the 5 elements? Especially the flame of the 5 elements that Senior Luan mentioned? That flame of the 5 elements is the real frigid flame, the flame of the true immortal realm. This world, I'm afraid it has never existed, right? Perhaps only the immortal realm. Has it? Xiao Hua shook his head. What is the origin of the 5 elements? Just as he was thinking, a foundation establishment cultivator's divine sense swept over, and at the same time, several gazes stopped on Xiao Hua's face. The boy also said in a low voice, This disciple will see you off here. Fellow Taoist, please. Thank you, fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, seemingly not arrogant because of the boy's low cultivation level. Seeing that the boy was a bit uneasy, Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at Luan's shop. When he saw the disappointed expression on the face of a 12th-layer qi refining female cultivator, he couldn't help but frown and secretly say, "Why haven't they left yet?" This female cultivator was none other than Xiao Hua's senior sister, Xiao Xinrui. Soon after, Xiao Hua's gaze turned from Xiao Xinrui's face to the other two cultivators. The other one had a charming face and a curvy figure. Naturally, she was none other than Jiang Yin of Hundred Herbs sect. However, when Xiao Hua saw her more than 10 years ago, Jiang Yin was in the 11th layer of qi refining. Now, she was at the peak of the 12th layer. Moreover, her eyebrows were raised, and the corners of her eyes were charming. Needless to say, she had already dual cultivated with someone. In the end, Xiao Hua's gaze landed on the Foundation Establishment Cultivator. This Foundation Establishment Cultivator was not Jiang Fan. This cultivator had a short stature and was even shorter than Jiang Yin, who was standing next to him. Moreover, this Foundation Establishment Cultivator looked like a burly man. Rather than calling him an immortal cultivator, it would be better to call him a farmer who managed a farm. The worst thing was that after this cultivator's gaze swept past Xiao Hua, he didn't pay any attention to him. He only tightly stuck the corner of his eyes to Xiao Xinrui's body, as if there was something there that attracted him. "Oh, fellow Daoist Zhang, you're out?" When Luan Han saw Xiao Hua come out, he immediately went to greet him. After all, Xiao Hua was very generous, completely unlike this Foundation Establishment Cultivator. He looked left and right, but didn't take out any spirit stones. Moreover, Zhang Ruan, who was next to him, was full of ridicule. She said something about how they couldn't compare to the Seven Skills sect, and how they were deceived by the waiter. Her words clearly indicated that she wanted Luan Han to lower the price. If it was before, Luan Han might have tolerated it. However, Xiao Hua had just been generous. Luan Han despised him in his heart and was too lazy to lower the price. Although his mouth was respectful, in his heart, he had already trampled on their image countless times. Now that he saw Xiao Hua come out, he naturally greeted him warmly. "Thank you for your guidance, fellow Daoist Luan." Xiao Hua smiled and cupped his hands. "Although I didn't get anything particularly useful, this trip wasn't in vain." "Hee, no problem, no problem." Luan Han grinned. "Fellow Daoist Zhang is so forthright. You'll be welcomed anywhere." As he spoke, he intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Jiang Yin. "Fellow Daoist Luan, what do you mean by that?" Jiang Yin was furious. After all, she was the young master of the 100 Herbs sect. When had she ever been looked down upon like this? "Oh, fellow Daoist Zhang, what did I say? What did I mean? I was just praising fellow Daoist Zhang for being generous. I didn't say others weren't generous." How could Luan Han be afraid of the 100 Herbs sect? He naturally retorted. "You." Jiang Yin raised her eyebrows and her chest heaved up and down. She was about to get angry. "Sister." Xiao Xinrui's gaze shifted from Xiao Hua's somewhat familiar figure and unfamiliar face to her. She quickly whispered, "This is Weeping Moon City. It's better to be careful." Seeing that the Foundation Establishment Cultivator didn't say anything and was still looking at Xiao Xinrui out of the corner of his eyes, Jiang Yin couldn't help but feel angry. She sneered and said, "What? You want to be careful in Weeping Moon City? Why didn't you say that when my big brother was here? He just went back to build his foundation and you came out to talk?" "Sister?" Xiao Xinrui was stunned. She raised her head and looked at Jiang Yin. She couldn't understand why Jiang Yin was acting so strangely. "I wanted to go to the Seven Skills sect shop, but you said this shop had a good reputation and insisted on coming here. This is your first time in Weeping Moon City, right? How do you know this shop has a good reputation?" "Oh, I know. You must have been here before. But who did you come with? No wonder you didn't go with my big brother when he went back to build his foundation. So you wanted to come to Weeping Moon City. What's your purpose in coming to Weeping Moon City? Are you looking for someone? Is this person in Luanji's shop?" Jiang Yin looked at Xiao Hua as she spoke. Xiao Hua's eyes widened, and he helplessly rubbed his chin. He wanted to leave, but the one being bullied was Xiao Xinrui. He naturally had to stay. Senior sister really is enduring humiliation. Every day in 100 Herbs sect must be like a year. Xiao Hua's heart was filled with hatred. It's a pity that I'm only at the early stage of foundation establishment. Otherwise, I would definitely kill my way to 100 Herbs sect. Sister, how can you say that? This isn't 100 Herbs sect. How can we let outsiders see us as a joke? Xiao Xinrui was anxious. She stepped forward and tugged at Jiang Yan's sleeve. What are you tugging at? Jiang Yan impatiently tugged at her sleeve and said with extreme annoyance, I don't know what my big brother was thinking that day, but he took a fancy to you. I don't know how many elixirs and miraculous medicines he used to raise your cultivation to the 12th level of qi refining. But where is foundation establishment? You've been cultivating for 10 years. Why haven't you reached foundation establishment? My 100 Herbs sect's elixirs have all been thrown into the water. When she heard foundation establishment, Xiao Xinrui's face turned pale. Her eyes were watery. She whispered in shame, Sister-in-law has done her best. Foundation establishment isn't something that can be achieved just because you say so. Sister-in-law didn't come to 100 Herbs sect because she wanted to gain more experience and have more hope of reaching foundation establishment. Hee, your words are better than a song. Who knows what you mean? Who knows what you're planning? Is this man? Jiang Yin saw that Xiao Hua's cultivation was only at the 12th level of qi refining. She was emboldened. She glanced at him and sneered. Peng. The spiritual energy in Luanji's shop suddenly became chaotic. Then, there was another pa sound. Everyone in Luanji's shop was stunned. -8. Chapter 1695. You, an aura refining cultivator, actually dared to hit me? Jiang uncovered her face with one hand. There were 2 reddish marks on her jade-white face. They were the marks left by Xiao Hua's left hand. Xiao Hua, on the other hand, was looking at the foundation establishment cultivator next to Jiang. His eyes flashed with a cold glint as he said coldly, This young master is a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Which sect are you from? You can talk about your own matters behind closed doors. Why involve this young master for no reason? This young master slap was only a warning. If you provoke this young master again, this young master will send out the thunder sound transmitting talisman from my sect and kill you. This young master doesn't believe that Fairy Chiue can ignore the fact that a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect is being bullied. Hearing Xiao Hua say that he was a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, the Foundation Establishment cultivator, who had just released his pressure and taken out his magic tool, had a huge change in expression. He was filled with regret. In fact, as early as a moment ago, when he saw Xiao Hua's face suddenly change color and his figure sway, he waved his hand and cast a spell, wanting to block Xiao Hua. Who would have thought that the spell he was full of confidence in couldn't block Xiao Hua at all? Xiao Hua also cast a spell and easily broke through his defense. Moreover, Xiao Hua was right in front of him. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Hua's palm slapped Jiang Lian's face. Although Jiang Lian tried his best to dodge, Xiao Hua's movements were really too fast. This is probably the Imperial Thunder sect's thunder escape technique. That Foundation Establishment cultivator thought to himself. Moreover, although this aura refining cultivator is under my pressure, he's not afraid of me at all. If he wasn't confident, how could it be possible? Even if I can kill him, what about Wan's shop? What about Sobbing Moon City? It's hard to hide the shame. The Foundation Establishment cultivator secretly complained. The Imperial Thunder sect? Luan Han was also shocked. Seeing the confrontation between Xiao Hua and that Foundation Establishment cultivator, he hurriedly took half a step forward and bowed deeply. He said to the 2 of them, Senior Yu, fellow Taoist Zhang, please don't be impatient. For I's sake, let's both take half a step back. Firstly, this is a misunderstanding. Secondly, this is Sobbing Moon City. Haha, that's fine. Fellow Taoist Luan, I have received a lot of benefits from you. How could I make things difficult for you? This is Senior Yu, right? Junior is a little rough and inexperienced, so I've made Senior laugh. I hope Senior can forgive me for my rudeness. Xiao Hua immediately said with a bright smile. Seeing that Xiao Hua was still able to speak so normally under his pressure, Senior Yu was shocked and hurriedly withdrew his pressure. He said with a smile, It was my wife who spoke too much and provoked little friend Zhang. How can you blame it all on little friend Zhang? I apologize on behalf of my wife. Hee. When Xiaohua saw the foundation-building cultivator withdraw his oppressive might, he immediately bowed in greeting. Bowing to a foundation-building cultivator wasn't a big deal, but the foundation-building cultivator raised his arm and blocked Xiaohua's salute. Xiaohua also seized the opportunity to get up and laughed. Everything is a misunderstanding. I am Zhang Hua from the lightning controlling sect. I still haven't asked for senior's name. I am Yutsong from the 10,000 Flowers Valley. The foundation establishment cultivator cupped his hands and said. Then, he pointed at Jiang Ao and said, This is I's humble Jiang Ao. Then, he pointed at Xiao Xinrui and said, This is Xiao Xinrui, the wife of the 100 Herbs Gate's young master. Xiaohua greeted the two with a smile. Jiang Ao clenched her teeth and returned the greeting under Yu Tsong's strict gaze. Xiao Xinrui, on the other hand, had already determined that Xiaohua wasn't Xiaohua. She greeted Xiaohua with an indifferent expression. After the greeting, Xiaohua said with a smile, Senior Yu, it's rare for Senior to be so magnanimous. Come, I wonder what Senior has taken a fancy to in this store. Junior will buy it to apologize to fellow Taoist Jiang. Don't mention it, there's no need. Isn't there a saying in the secular world? No discord, no concord. Since we know each other, there's no need to mention the previous matters. Yutsong flicked his big sleeve and said, I actually admire fellow Taoist Zhang's boldness. If I have time, I will hold a banquet in the Drunken Immortal Pavilion and invite fellow Taoist Zhang or your sex teachers to come over for a chat. How about it? Io, this is difficult. Xiaohua spread his hands and said, I want to have a chat with Senior Yu, but the timing isn't right. No matter. Yu Tsong waved his hand again and again. Since it's not right, then forget it. And then Junior has been rude. Xiaohua cupped his hands and bid farewell. Junior will take his leave first. When Yu Tsong nodded with a smile, Xiaohua said to Luan Han again, Fellow Taoist Luan, bring the peacock from the box. I will give it to my junior sister. As he said that, he didn't ask any questions and handed over some high-grade spirit stones. Luan Han couldn't stop smiling and waved his hand again and again. There's no need for so many. Xiaohua took the spirit stones and threw them on the table with a wave of his hand. That fatty Luan Jiaming looked at Luan Han's expression and quickly put away the spirit stones and took out the peacock doll. Seeing the peacock doll, Xiao Xinrui couldn't help but open her mouth slightly. This doll was far inferior to the peacock fantasy, but it was still very beautiful. Xiao Xinrui had always liked peacocks, so it was natural for her to be envious. Xiaohua was originally paying attention to Xiao Xinrui. Seeing this, he smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao also likes this peacock? Xiao Xinrui knew that he was testing her, so she glanced at Xiaohua and said indifferently, It's not that I like it, but I've seen something similar before. Oh, so it's like that. Xiaohua nodded, glanced at Yu Tsong and said with a smile, Junior just said that he wanted to apologize to Senior. What a coincidence. This thing is for fellow Taoist Xiao. Goodbye. As he said that, Xiaohua waved his hand and the peacock flew in front of Xiao Xinrui and stopped. Xiaohua cupped his hands and walked out of Luanji's shop without looking back. Xiao Xinrui was slightly stunned. She wanted to greet Xiaohua, but she looked at Yukong. After all, Xiaohua said that to Yukong, since it's like this, fellow Taoist Xiao should accept it. Yu Tsong smiled and stared at Xiao Xinrui with a fervent gaze. Then, she looked at Xiaohua's gradually disappearing figure with thought-provoking eyes. Husband. It was clearly the lowly concubine who was beaten. How did my sister-in-law get away with it? Zhang Hong couldn't help but become anxious again. Her voice fell into Xiaohua's ears as he walked out of the shop. 100 Grass sect really isn't scrupulous. In order to annex Shanghuaming, they used despicable means to kill Xiao Yuehong and 2 senior martial brothers. In order to expand their power, they married their daughter to a dwarf from 100 Flower Valley. An early foundation establishment cultivator can make 100 Grass sect act like this. No wonder Yu Tsong didn't dare to cause trouble when he knew I was a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Xiaohua sneered. After walking for a while and seeing that there was no one around, he walked into a dark corner. Not long after, a cultivator with a different appearance, figure, and Cultivation base walked out of the dark corner. He looked around and slowly returned to Luanji's shop. Outside Luanji's shop, Yutsong and the others had already come out. They were walking out of this remote street. The three of them had completely different expressions on their faces. Jiang'an was angry, but her eyes kept glancing at Xiao Xinrui. Xiao Xinrui's face was full of awkwardness. Although she wasn't holding the peacock doll in her hand, it was as if the doll was in her hand. She looked at Yutsong again. His face was expressionless, but there was a kind of gloominess in his eyes, as if he was angry and jealous. Just a few steps away from Luanji's shop, Jiang'an opened her mouth and said sarcastically, "Husband, you look so mighty in front of me every day. How come you met a 12th layer Qi refining brat? Shut up." Without waiting for Jiang'an to finish, Yutsong shouted, his eyes wide open. He glared at Jiang'an and said, "Isn't it all because of you? It's fine if you talk nonsense, but you have no reason to drag in a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. What kind of sect is the Imperial Thunder Sect? Do you still need me to tell you? If it was a disciple of an ordinary sect, how could I let you suffer? Even if I have to risk being punished by Fairy Chiyue, I will kill this bastard with one palm." Jiang'an gritted her teeth. She knew that Yutsong was right. If an accident really happened to a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, the Imperial Thunder Sect could destroy the 100 Herbs Gate with one little toe. As for the 100 Flowers Valley, maybe they could do it with 3 or 4 little toes. Wife, don't be angry. We can't fight with a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect in Chiyue City, but I didn't say that we can't fight outside. Yutsong's face showed a trace of affection. He said in a low voice, "I've already used some means to mark that brat called Zhanghua. When we get out of Chiyue City, I will avenge you." Hearing this, Jiang'an beamed with joy. Her eyes were like silk. She took Yutsong's hand and said, "This lowly concubine knows that my husband loves me the most." Yutsong's eyes also flashed with a lustful light, which then fell on Xiao Xinrui. "By the way, husband, didn't Zhanghua say that he was with a master of the Imperial Thunder Sect? If there is a Foundation establishment cultivator, you have to be careful. Don't fight, or you will cause trouble for the 100 Flowers Valley and the 100 Herbs Gate." Jiang'an thought again and hurriedly said with concern, "Why don't we just let it go? I'm not injured anyway. You're indeed a good wife and mother. I understand. For your sake, I won't bicker with the Imperial Thunder Sect." Yutsong used his hand to carefully stroke Jiang'an's butt. He narrowed his eyes and said, "When we get back to the inn, we will rest for a night. Tomorrow, I will go out and take a look. If that bastard has already left, I will let him go." Hearing Yutsong say that they would rest for a night, Jiang'an's eyes seemed to be about to water. Xiao Xinrui frowned and said in a low voice, "Senior Yu, my husband has already returned to Yellow Flower Ridge. I don't want to train anymore. I will go back now and bid farewell to you." "Humph, sister-in-law should have gone back long ago." Jiang'an's face was bright red as she spoke. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, why don't you stay for a few more days?" Yutsong's face was somewhat disappointed. He urged her to stay. "You just had a conflict with the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples. If they hold a grudge, the way back will not be safe. Wait a few more days. I will personally send you off." "Thank you for your concern, senior. I will take my leave." Xiao Xinrui bowed her head, cupped her hands, and quickly left. "You and the others, escort young sect master's wife away." Jiang'an raised her head and shouted at the 100 Herbs Gate disciples who were around the 9th layer of Qi refining. "Yes, disciple understands." After the disciples agreed, they followed Xiao Xinrui, who had her head lowered, and left. The other disciples followed Jiang'an and Yukong. When they were far away, Xiaohua's figure gradually appeared in a corner of the street. He patted a shiny invisibility talisman in his hand and put it back into his space. "Damn it! Where did Yutsong leave a mark on my body? Why can't I find it after searching for so long with my Buddhist awareness?" Xiaohua saw that there was no one nearby and blurted out curses. -8. Chapter 1696. Xiao Xinrui was very sad. Unspeakable sadness. Perhaps seeing Xiaohua's back reminded her of the past that she didn't want to remember, which made her sad. Or maybe the peacock doll that Xiao Hua gave her reminded her of the peacock fantasy, her birthday, and the years when she was protected by her family, which made her sad. Or maybe it was because Xiao Hua claimed to be a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect and forced Yu Cong, who was at the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, not daring to make things difficult for him. Or maybe it was because of her background and self-pity. Or maybe it was because the arrogant Xiao Hua was at the 12th layer of the Qi refining realm, which made her think of her own 12th layer of the Qi refining realm and the knot in her heart that she couldn't break through to the Foundation establishment realm. In short, Xiao Xinrui stepped on the spirit camel carriage absent-mindedly. Surrounded by several disciples of the 100 Herbs sect, she randomly chose a direction and left the Weeping Moon City. However, after everyone had flown for half a meal, a disciple finally mustered the courage to call out in a low voice, "Young madam, where are we going?" "Back to the 100 Herbs sect, of course," Xiao Xinrui replied angrily. "But are we going to fly back to the 100 Herbs sect like this?" The disciple whispered. The ship in the sect was taken away by the young master. "How can we?" Alas. Hearing this, Xiao Xinrui immediately stopped in the air. The Weeping Moon City was very far from the 100 Herbs sect, and now was not the time for training. There was no reason for them to use the teleportation formation in the Weeping Moon City. "What's wrong with me?" Xiao Xinrui smiled bitterly and waved her hand. Back to the Weeping Moon City. At this moment, behind Xiao Xinrui and the others, a figure flew quickly from the direction of the Weeping Moon City and came to their side in the blink of an eye. Who is this?" Xiao Xinrui scanned with her divine sense and found that the person was unfamiliar. She felt a little strange, but she didn't care and turned to fly away. Unexpectedly, when Xiao Xinrui flew less than 10 feet, she suddenly saw the cultivator, who was about 10 feet away from her, stop and give her a very strange smile. Oh no! Even if Xiao Xinrui didn't have much experience, she knew that this cultivator was coming for them. However, she didn't understand. This cultivator was only in the 11th layer of Qi refining. Why would he dare to attack her? Moreover, there were several 9th layer Qi refining disciples next to him. How can he be so bold? Xiao Xinrui was surprised, but she didn't dare to be negligent. She clapped her hands, and a dark green machete appeared in her hands. The scimitar was only half a foot long, and the blade was engraved with different runes. The small handle of the scimitar was held in Xiao Xinrui's hand. This was Xiao Xinrui's magic weapon, the crescent moon. Xiao Xinrui was alert, and so were the other disciples of the 100 Herbs Gate. They took out their yellow talismans and stood in front of Xiao Xinrui, scolding, "Where did this madman come from? What do you want?" "Haha, what can I do?" The cultivator laughed and said, "To take your lives." As he spoke, the cultivator was already less than 10 meters away from them. "Go!" Everyone was furious. They activated their magic power, and the yellow talismans in their hands shot out. Xiao Xinrui also sneered. She waved her hand, and the crescent moon absorbed her magic power. A dark green light flashed in the air and streaked towards the cultivator. However, the cultivator didn't seem to panic when he saw the fireballs, water arrows, and other attacks. His face was full of mockery. In this mocking expression, the cultivator opened his mouth, and a green and red sword light shot out from his mouth. Flying sword talisman? Xiao Xinrui's heart relaxed. With her knowledge of Shang Huoming and the 100 Herbs Gate, she could only think of it as a flying sword talisman. But then, the green and red sword light suddenly flashed, and 2 of them flew out. Then, with another 2 flashes, there were 8 of them. Xiao Xinrui couldn't help but turn pale with fright. An inconceivable feeling rose from the bottom of her heart. Flying swords? This was something she had accidentally heard a few days ago when Yutsong was showing off. She didn't expect to actually encounter it today. Now that she thought of the flying sword, Xiao Xinrui felt as if her heart had fallen into an ice cave. The 8 beams of sword light did not disappoint her. Right in front of her eyes, they cut through many yellow talismans as if they were pieces of yellow paper. At the same time, they pierced the throats of several disciples of the 100 Herbs sect at a speed faster than her crescent moon. These disciples did not fight back at all, and their protective brilliance was as useless as a piece of paper. Seeing the disciples fall into the air, Xiao Xinrui's eyes narrowed. She activated her magic power and once again waved her crescent moon. A ray of light that was much brighter than before drew an arc in the air and shot towards the cultivator. At this time, the cultivator opposite Xiao Xinrui seemed to have used up a lot of his magic power. He opened his mouth, and the flying sword disappeared into it. Then, the cultivator clapped his hand, and several yellow talismans appeared in his hand. As he activated his magic power, several fireball talismans flew towards Xiao Xinrui. Fortunately, seeing this, Xiao Xinrui's previously despaired heart gave birth to a glimmer of hope. This guy probably didn't use a flying sword, but something similar. Because the magic power used is too great, it can't last long. I am at the 12th layer of Qi refining. Facing a cultivator who has used up a lot of his magic power, I can win. Rumble. With a few loud sounds, the crescent moon's brilliance was blocked by the fireball talismans. Immediately, it exploded, and a heat wave rushed towards them. What fireball talisman? How can it be more powerful than the best fireball talisman? Xiao Xinrui was stunned. She didn't dare to be negligent. She also slapped her storage bag and took out all kinds of defensive yellow talismans, regardless of whether they were defensive or offensive. With a shake of her hand, she threw them out, wanting to block Xiao Hua's fireball talismans. At the same time, her right hand continuously waved the scimitar, chopping out from different angles to block all directions, lest the cultivator take advantage of the chaos to attack in front of her. Her left hand was also forming a hand seal, preparing a suitable spell. Seeing the brilliance of the crescent moon, Xiao Xinrui's heart slightly calmed down. She knew that the enemy wouldn't attack for the time being. Then, she used her divine sense to search for an opening to escape. Although the opponent's cultivation was at the 10th layer of Qi refining, that strange sword light was too powerful. She knew that she wasn't a match for it. Now that the opponent's fireball talisman and other attacks were obviously to recover his magic power, if she didn't take the opportunity to escape now, when the sword light appeared again, it would be the time of her death. However, just as Xiao Xinrui was about to escape, a figure like a ghost floated and flashed through the brilliance that Xiao Xinrui had just hacked out. Often, it would bypass the brilliance that Xiao Xinrui had used all her strength to hack out, easily dodging the brilliance that Xiao Xinrui had used all her strength to hack out. Moreover, the cultivator's figure was very fast. In the blink of an eye, the distance between them was 20 feet. Which family did I provoke this fiend? Xiao Xinrui was shocked. She urged all the magic power in her body. The crescent moon in her hand flashed with a dark green brilliance, and a ray of light shot out from the scimitar. Xiao Xinrui knew that she couldn't escape. She turned around, shouted, and raised her scimitar to hack out. -8. Chapter 1697. Xiao Xinrui's heart trembled with fear. She urged all the spiritual energy in her body and poured it into the crescent moon. The crescent moon suddenly turned into a dark green crescent moon. Xiao Xinrui's snow-white hand drew a line. The dark green brilliance was like a lover's charming glance, extremely accurate and extremely fast, shooting towards the cultivator who didn't have any magic weapon in his hand. Xiao Xinrui thought that even if this cultivator had a fireball more powerful than the best fireball talisman, this blade light would inevitably cut everything in front of it into two halves. That cultivator would absolutely not easily dodge it. Unfortunately, looking at the coldness in the cultivator's eyes, and then looking at the cultivator's expressionless face, Xiao Xinrui's little bit of confidence that had just been born wavered again. Sure enough, just as Xiao Xinrui urged her cultivation method and tried her best to urge her spiritual energy, the cultivator suddenly stretched out his hand and took out a huge black hammer from nowhere. Then, as if it was light, he smashed it forward, directly facing the crescent moon. Demon weapon. Xiao Xinrui was shocked and almost blurted out, "You are a disciple of the heavenly demon sect." Just as Xiao Xinrui exclaimed, the demonic hammer had already touched the light of the crescent moon. Clang, a loud sound rang out. This sound was both sharp and loud. The black head of the demonic hammer was not damaged at all, but the dazzling dark green brilliance just now was like glass shattering, turning into little fluorescent lights, scattering in the air. Sure enough, it's a demonic weapon. Xiao Xinrui's mouth had a trace of bitterness. She clearly knew the difference between her magic weapon and a real demonic weapon. I'm afraid I'm going to die. Xiao Xinrui despaired. Her eyes looked at the demonic hammer that seemed to have encountered no resistance and continued to rush towards her. Xiao Xinrui steeled her heart and waved the crescent moon again. Gotcha, the crescent moon was just a magic weapon, and it was a magic weapon of a refinement cultivator. How could Xiao Xinrui use her own body to attack the demonic weapon? With a crisp sound, the crescent moon suddenly shattered into several pieces. The fragments were like the broken shadow of the crescent moon in the rippling water, floating in the air. Go to hell. Xiao Xinrui heard the cultivator's ferocious roar, and the shadow of the demonic hammer in front of her grew larger and larger, covering her entire vision. An unparalleled force pressed down on her forehead, and within this force, there seemed to be a strange undulation. Mother! It was very strange. Under the shadow of death's shadow, Xiao Xinrui's first thought, but a vague image of a female cultivator that she had depicted countless times in her heart since childhood, but she had never succeeded in depicting a female cultivator's image. An unyielding, a kind of unwillingness spontaneously rose. Although this fluctuation was extremely faint and almost undetectable, what exactly was this fluctuation? Qi in. The qi in qi instantly began to condense into qi. Alas, I'm finally going to build my foundation. What a pity. Xiao Xinrui's heart flashed with a trace of joy, but as soon as the joy appeared, Xiao Xinrui felt a chill on her forehead. The demonic hammer had already touched her shiny skin. It's too late. Xiao Xinrui suddenly seemed to have understood. She slowly closed her eyes. However, after a few seconds, the sharp pain didn't come, and the force on her forehead also disappeared. Xiao Xinrui opened her eyes in shock and saw the strange cultivator standing not far away with a smile on his face. His voice was also strange. Fellow Taoist Xiao, do you want to use the spirit accumulation talisman? Or do you want to build your foundation now? Xiao Xinrui didn't understand the situation for a while. This change was really too fast. The cultivator frowned and urged, Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't you want to take the foundation establishment pill or use the spirit accumulation talisman? Spirit accumulation talisman? Xiao Xinrui was a little surprised. She quickly took out a foundation establishment pill from her storage bag and opened her mouth to take it. Wait, the cultivator shouted. Xiao Xinrui was so scared that her hand trembled, and the foundation establishment pill almost fell out of the air. At this time, she already knew that the other party must be a foundation establishment senior, maybe even a golden core senior. Don't resist, the cultivator said gently. Then he waved his hand, and a shiny talisman flew out from his hand and slowly floated to Xiao Xinrui's forehead. Talisman? Xiao Xinrui saw this and was even more sure of her guess. However, she was still nervous. She really didn't understand why this senior, who didn't know whether he was a foundation establishment senior or a golden core senior, didn't let her build her foundation. When the talisman disappeared on Xiao Xinrui's forehead, Xiao Xinrui suddenly found that her condensed true qi had stopped condensing. Of course, the condensed true qi didn't melt back into true qi. This is... Xiao Xinrui's face showed a trace of surprise. Poor child, the cultivator sighed. He waved his hand and a jade slip flew to Xiao Xinrui. He smiled and said, Take a look. Yes, this junior knows. Xiao Xinrui took the jade slip and read it with her spiritual sense. Her face changed and she murmured, There is such a talisman in the world? The peak of qi refining. It's really incredible. Then she immediately bowed and saluted. This junior thanks senior for helping me. Please give me a name. This junior will never forget it. Alas, forget it. It's just a name. Don't mention it. The cultivator waved his sleeve and said sadly, Hurry back to Weeping Moon City. Don't let a third person know about what happened today. Xiao Xinrui was suspicious. She gritted her teeth and said, Yes, This junior swears that I will never tell a third person. However, if senior doesn't give me a name, this junior will never return to the city. What does it have to do with me whether you return or not? The cultivator sneered. He turned around and flew far away in a flash. Senior, Xiao Xinrui shouted. She also urged her spiritual power to chase after him. Unfortunately, her flying technique was not good. The true qi in her meridians had just condensed into true qi. How could she catch up with him? She only chased for 10 feet, but he had disappeared. Alas, which senior is this? Xiao Xinrui looked into the distance blankly and said to herself, if he has a relationship with my 100 Herbs Gate, how could he be so cruel and merciless and kill so many of my disciples? Oh, could it be that he is friends with Father? Xiao Xinrui's heart suddenly jumped. But there is a cultivator with such a cultivation. I have never heard Father mention him before. He can help people to build their foundation and give them the spiritual accumulation talisman. Such a powerful person. How could Father know him? Xiao Xinrui had a myriad of thoughts in her mind. She then helplessly landed on a mountain peak and replenished the true qi in her meridians. Only then did she fly up and head towards Weeping Moon City. After Xiao Xinrui flew away, a slender figure appeared on the mountain peak. It was Xiaohua. Senior sister, I'm sorry for destroying your magic weapon. If there is a chance in the future, I will give you a magic weapon. Looking gently at the place where Xiao Xinrui disappeared, Xiaohua said in a low voice, perhaps the next time we meet will be when I destroy the 100 Herbs Gate. At that time, senior sister won't have to bear the humiliation anymore. Then Xiaohua also flew up. However, he flew very slowly, as if he was escorting Xiao Xinrui back to the city. Oh, by the way, Heavenly Demon Sect? What kind of sect is it? Is it a demonic cultivator? Xiaohua thought doubtfully as he flew. Why did senior sister say that when she saw me take out the demonic weapon? With Xiaohua's escort, Xiao Xinrui naturally returned to Weeping Moon City safely. Xiaohua was still worried. When Xiao Xinrui entered the teleportation formation of Weeping Moon City, he waved his hand and stopped a spirit camel carriage to return to the inn. When Xiaohua returned to the inn, the full moon had already risen. Without waiting for him to enter the inn, Qiandiheng rushed out from the inn, grabbed Xiaohua's arm, and scolded, Junior brother Xiao, where did you go? Why didn't you say anything when you went out? The auction was about to start, but I didn't see you. Then, without waiting for Xiaohua's explanation, the three of them hurriedly got on the spirit camel carriage. Xiaohua got on the spirit camel carriage and scanned with his divine sense. He saw that there was no sign of Fanyi among the waiters in the inn. He couldn't help but feel a little regretful. I was thinking about covering my tracks and forgot. Fanyi of this and must have met Luanjiaming of Luan's shop. How could they not tell me in advance? It's really troublesome. However, he immediately felt relieved. Although my name has changed, it's understandable. Presumably, they won't think too much about it. As for my appearance, I'm not a female cultivator. I'm afraid those men will only talk about senior sister and Jiang Yan. How is it possible for you to recall my appearance? Looking at Jiang Yan's attitude towards senior sister, I know how senior sister endured humiliation in 100 Herbs Gate. Alas, my cultivation isn't enough to deal with 100 Herbs Gate. Now there's also 100 Flowers Valley. Xiaohua clenched his teeth and thought again. Senior sister, when we meet again, it'll be the time when I save you from the fire pit. It'll also be the time when I destroy 100 Herbs Gate. Humph, if 100 Flowers Valley doesn't know what's good for them, I definitely won't be lenient. Senior sister, just bear with it for a few more years. Junior brother Xiao, where did you go? Sun Shu saw Xiaohua pondering and asked quietly. Xiaohua smiled and said, I didn't go anywhere. I just walked around Chiyue City and came across a refining shop. I bought some materials. Xiaohua took out some materials for Qiandiheng and the others to see. Hee, junior brother Xiao, you should put these things away. Qiandiheng was obviously not interested. Why did you buy these? Do you really want to make your own furnace? Although Swallow Thunder Ridge doesn't get along with Myriad Thunder Valley, refining magic tools is their responsibility. You only need to give them to Shocking Thunder Palace. You don't need to see them directly. I just thought it was interesting. It's said that that place is cheap, so I thought about it. Alas, you can't delay business. Sun Shu said somewhat reproachfully, the auction has a time limit. If you're late, you won't be able to enter. Sorry, I know I was wrong. Xiao Hua bowed. -8. Chapter 1698. Listening to Sun Shu and Qiandiheng's complaints, Xiao Hua could only smile bitterly. He just saw that he had plenty of time, so he went to Wanji's shop to buy some refining materials, preparing to refine it himself. He didn't think that it would take long. Who would have thought that he would meet Xiao Xinrui? He would not have thought that Xiao Xinrui was also at the peak of the 12th level of qi refining and was looking for the opportunity to build her foundation. Naturally, for Xiao Xinrui's foundation building, Xiao Hua would not regret not going to the auction, not to mention that he tried to help Xiao Xinrui build her foundation and succeeded in one strike. The joy of being able to help his former senior sister had already made him throw aside the resentment of Qiandiheng and Qiandiheng. The spirit camel carriage traveled for the time it took to burn a stick of incense and stopped in front of a rather large building. At this time, the night was getting darker, and the whole building, except for a few lights, was completely submerged in the night. At first glance, it looked like a terrifying giant beast. Oh, I'm afraid it's too late. Sun Shu frowned, looking at the cold courtyard of the tall building, and whispered, "It's too late." Sun Shu and Qiandiheng were chatting, and Kuan Fian, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "The auction may not have what we want. Tomorrow, let's go to EG or the shop to have a look." Qiandiheng looked at Kuan Fian strangely and said, "Everything in the shop is normal. If you want to find something good, you can only find it in the auction." Fellow Taoists, the auction has already begun. Please return to your seats. Wait for the next auction in a month. Before the four people walked to the door, a city guard came out from the dark door. Seeing the four people's cultivation, he did not dare to neglect, and after bowing, he said respectfully, "Haha, fellow cultivator." Qiandiheng laughed, took a few steps forward, and affectionately held the other person's hand and said, "I am a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, and I just came to Chiyu City. I have long admired the reputation of the auction in Chiyu City, so I hurriedly took the spirit camel carriage here. You see, didn't the spirit camel carriage just leave? Moreover, we are going to another place to gain experience tomorrow, so we need to participate in the auction. I'm afraid we won't be able to make it in a month. Fellow cultivator, please make an exception." With that said, Qiandiheng's other hand moved slightly, and a few spirit stones were quietly stuffed into the hands of the city guard. The city guard hesitated for a moment, then smiled and said, "So you're a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. I have been disrespectful. Since they have come from afar and are in urgent need of training, it would be unethical of me to stop them. Fortunately, although the four of you are late, the magic treasures for today's finale have yet to arrive. The four of you are really lucky. Please." As the guard spoke, he discreetly put away the spirit stone and moved to the side, leaving an empty space. "Haha, thank you, fellow Taoist." Qiandiheng nodded with a smile. Without stopping, he hurried in. Xiao Hua and the others also cupped their hands with a smile and followed in. Sun Shu walked past the city guard and said in a low voice, "A transcendent artifact actually appeared in the auction in Weeping Moon City? May I know what this magic treasure is?" When the city guard heard that, he was very proud and said with a smile, "Magic treasures often appear in our Weeping Moon City's auctions. Even the worst of them are high-grade magic tools. As for what kind of magic treasure will appear today, I also don't know. Fellow Taoists, please go inside and take a look." When the four of them entered, they found themselves in an extremely bright hall. This hall was not circular, but strangely polygonal. On each side of the hall, there were several small triangular doors. These small doors were overflowing with light, and there were also fluctuations of spiritual power. It was obvious that there was a restriction placed on them. "Seniors, please hurry up and follow this junior into the auction hall." Seeing someone come in, the several children standing in the hall were slightly stunned. Immediately, four children came out from the crowd, walked in front of the four people, and said respectfully. Xiao Hua followed a little girl to a small triangular door in the hall. That little girl said respectfully, "Senior, If you go through this small door, you will find a temporary magic array. Inside the magic array, you can't use your magic power. Senior can change the maze inside. After you go out of the magic array, you will find a corridor about 10 feet long. After you go through the corridor, you will arrive at the auction hall. Senior, please hurry up. These small doors are about to close. Xiaohua slightly turned his head. Sun Shu and the other two were not far from him. They were all standing at a small door, so he nodded and said, I know. Thank you for your guidance. After saying that, he cupped his hands and stepped through the small door. Just as Xiaohua and the others stepped through the small door, several cultivators who looked like city guards of Chiyu City surrounded a cultivator wearing a maze. They hurriedly came in from outside the door. Although they couldn't see the cultivation level of that cultivator, there was actually a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator among these city guards. That cultivator was very respectful to this maze cultivator. Presumably, this cultivator's cultivation level wasn't lower than the foundation establishment realm. The several people entered from a small door in the corner of the hall. None of the children in the hall went up to greet them, and there wasn't a trace of surprise on their faces. At this time, Xiaohua had already put on the maze, but after leaving the restriction, he found that the corridor wasn't empty. Instead, there was a 7th-layer Qi refining cultivator quietly waiting there. When he saw Xiaohua come out, he went up and said with a smile, Senior, is this your first time participating in Chiyu City's auction? Xiaohua nodded and said yes. The cultivator took out 3 things from his storage bag. One was a jade slip, one was a token, and the last one was a stick. He handed it over and said with a smile, this token is the number that Senior used to participate in today's auction. It was randomly arranged and didn't follow any order. Moreover, the number is only revealed after Senior has read the jade slip and injected your magic power into it. As for this competition wood, it is used by Senior during the auction. It is a set with this token. It's so complicated? Xiaohua was slightly surprised, but then he was happy. Only such a complicated method could prove the completeness of Chiyu City's auction and ensure the safety of the bidding cultivators. Naturally, it could make the participating cultivators feel relieved. After receiving the 3 things, Xiaohua immersed his divine sense into the jade slip. He roughly understood that the incantation was very simple, but it could be used. While walking through the corridor, Xiaohua imprinted the incantation on the token according to the instructions. Number 422. There was a flash of brilliance on Xiaohua's token, but the number didn't flash on the token. Hee, as the jade slip said, only the holder of the token knows about this token. Others can't see it with their naked eyes or divine sense. More than 400 people, it's not much different from the number of cultivators participating in Yinyuan City's auction. Xiaohua thought to himself. He had already passed through the corridor. Xiaohua didn't have time to test the usage of the competition wood. He passed through the light screen at the end of the corridor and entered the auction hall. When he saw the situation inside the hall, he couldn't help but be stunned. -8. Chapter 1699. What entered Xiaohua's eyes was a huge hall. In the middle of the hall was a transparent platform that was several feet high. The rest of the hall was filled with cultivators that were participating in the auction. It was a sea of black. Could it be that there were at least a few thousand people sitting there? Damn it! Why are there so many cultivators? Xiaohua almost blurted out. He thought about his 422 number. Sure enough, it was given casually and there was no order to it. Just like the auction in Yinyuan City, the cultivators in the hall were all sitting on jade chairs. Some of these cultivators were wearing camouflage robes, some were wearing ordinary robes, and some were wearing strange cloaks. Although it was different from the camouflage robes, it was impossible to see their faces. Unlike the auction in Yinyuan City, the chairs in the hall seemed to have restrictions. When Xiaohua scanned them with his divine sense was actually bounced off the chairs. He couldn't see the cultivation of the cultivators sitting on the chairs. Seeing that there was an empty chair not far away, Xiaohua slowly walked over. As he walked, he looked around to see if there were any traces of Sun Shu and the others. What made Xiaohua happy was that he didn't see anyone's shadow at all. It seemed that there were some illusion arrays in the hall. Great! Xiaohua was very satisfied. He immediately sat on the chair and looked at the auction wood in his hand. This competition would seem to be made of jade, but it was extremely cold to the touch. It was far from the usual warmth of jade. Xiao Hua poured his magic power into the competition wood. The competition wood was suffused with a light green brilliance, and a kind of spiritual power fluctuation flew out. However, this spiritual power only flew out of the range of the jade chair before disappearing into the space of the main hall. It didn't go far. Xiao Hua knew that the auction hadn't started yet, so the auction wood couldn't be used. Simple numbers can be sent through the auction wood. Complex or other things can be sent through the auction wood. Not bad. Xiao Hua lowered his head and carefully studied the auction wood's function. After all, it was his first time participating in the auction in Weeping Moon City, so he had to be careful. A short moment later, the light in the hall receded and a three-colored light screen appeared from the platform. It was like a school of fish swimming in the ocean as it danced around the hall. On the light screen, a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator appeared. His figure gradually appeared on the platform like an image in a mirror. His figure would occasionally elongate and shrink as he gradually appeared on the platform. Fellow Taoists. The foundation establishment cultivator cupped his hands and said, I am the host of this auction, Chang Fian. I am very happy that all of you are able to attend this auction on time. There are many things that all of you are looking forward to in this auction. I believe that all of you won't return empty-handed. Although Chang Fian was cupping his fists in a certain direction, every one of the cultivators within the hall could see that he was cupping his fists towards them. Additionally, Chang Fian's voice was faint. However, every one of the cultivators could hear him clearly. It was as though Chang Fian was whispering to them. After saying a few more words, Chang Fian clapped his hands and said with a smile, although I's words are pleasant to hear, they are still not as good as the items being auctioned. Everyone, I won't say any more. Let's begin the auction for today's first item. As he said that, he clapped his hands and a jade plate appeared out of thin air from a corner of the platform. The plate was covered with a brocade cloth, blocking everyone's sight and divine sense. Chang Fian waved his hand again, and the plate flew in front of him and stopped in mid-air. Chang Fian took off the brocade cloth, revealing 3 jade bottles on the jade plate. These are the Peiyuan pill, marrow cleansing pill, and vitality assimilation pill used by qi refining cultivators. The Peiyuan pill is a set of 10, starting at 15 high-grade spirit stones. The marrow cleansing pill is a set of 20, starting at 10 high-grade spirit stones. The vitality assimilation pill is a set of 3, also starting at 10 high-grade spirit stones. However, after Chang Fian finished speaking, no one bid. For a moment, the entire hall was silent. Why is that? Could it be that the price of these medicinal pills is too high? Xiao Hua was somewhat baffled. However, at this moment, Chang Fian waved his big sleeve and a disc-like magic tool flew into the air. A white brilliance shot out from the disc and condensed into a light screen in mid-air. On the light screen, a string of words kept jumping. Xiao Hua's gaze swept over it and understood that it was the number and the number of spirit stones being auctioned. Sure enough, he heard Chang Fian say with a smile, all right, the 97th cultivator has bid. If there are no higher bids, I'll rule that the 97th cultivator wins. Of course, above the light screen was the number 97th and another number. Xiao Hua thought for a moment. Magic power surged in his hand, and he waved the competition wood slightly. Sure enough, Chang Fian immediately said, all right, fellow Taoist number 422 has bid. Haha, this fellow Taoist really has good eyesight. This bottle of medicinal pills was refined by a famous alchemist in the 100 Flowers Valley. Its medicinal power is far superior to other medicinal pills. As soon as Chang Fian finished speaking, many cultivators in the hall became restless. Not only did their voices rise and fall, but their hands were also not idle. They all began to wave the competition wood and raise the price of the medicinal pills again and again. This senior really knows how to bid. He raised the price of the medicinal pills by a lot with just one sentence. Xiao Hua stopped after testing the effects of the competition wood and sneered in his heart. Afterwards, there were also some medicinal pills for ore refining cultivators, foundation building cultivators, and even a few for golden core cultivators. All of them were won by unknown cultivators through bidding. All right, fellow Taoists, the ordinary medicinal pills are finished. Next are some medicinal pills with special effects. Chang Fian mysteriously smiled. He pointed at the jade bottle and said, "This is the revolving illumination pill. It is refined from the rainbow cloud." There is no need for this poor Taoist to explain. Everyone already knows that this is a supreme item that can stimulate divine sense. This revolving illumination pill, as well as other medicinal pills with special effects, has no starting price. Fellow Taoists, please start bidding. Revolving illumination pill. Not to mention the others, even Xiao Hua was surprised. The rainbow cloud was not easy to find. Every time a rainbow cloud appeared, it was accompanied by the life of a cultivator. Although Xiao Hua's space was mystical, it only had one rainbow cloud. However, Xiao Hua himself was also puzzled. He didn't understand why after he picked the rainbow cloud, he was able to produce a second one. There were many cultivators bidding for the revolving illumination pill. Xiao Hua saw many cultivators around him repeatedly waving their hands. Finally, the price of the revolving illumination pill was raised to 20 top-grade spirit stones. It was actually twice the price of an ordinary foundation establishment pill. Damn, they're crazy. Xiao Hua curled his lips. But thinking about the powerful effects of divine sense, he felt that it was normal. After all, foundation establishment pills were easy to refine, but rainbow clouds were not common. Afterwards, special medicinal pills such as embryonic breathing pill, illumination pill, Elaine pill, and essence flower pill appeared one by one. Each medicinal pill caused a sensation. When essence flower pill appeared, Xiao Hua madly bid several times. But in the end, he couldn't resist the impulse of others. He sighed and gave up. After all, young master's situation is different from others. One or two medicinal pills may not be enough. If I only bid for the essence flower pill, I'm afraid I'm neglecting the essentials. Let's look at the spirit grass used to refine the essence flower pill. Xiao Hua helplessly thought. Moreover, unlike other medicinal pills, the final bidding price of the Elaine pill, which was hard to find elsewhere, was not too high. Presumably, it was because the Elaine green fruit and other medicinal pills were commonly seen in Weeping Moon City. So Xiao Hua also had the idea of bidding for the spirit grass. Xiao Hua's space had many spirit grasses. They were all carefully collected and planted by Xiao Hua, so they could be considered complete. But human strength couldn't compare to heavenly strength. On the Xiaoyu continent, there were countless types of spirit grasses. How could Xiao Hua collect them all? Bright flower fruit, essence returning grass, Elaine green fruit, and Dan He, these 4 spirit grasses, Xiao Hua's space didn't have them. Moreover, Xiao Hua still had a problem, and that was the bright flower pill's pill recipe. Although Xiao Hua had obtained Zhang Xie's jade slip and there were some pill recipes in it, these pill recipes were all common. Bright flower pill and other special pill recipes were still rare. Although Xiao Hua could gather the spirit grasses and spirit fruits, if he wanted to refine the bright flower pill, he would have to think of another way. After that, there were some rare medicinal pills. Some could increase divine sense, some could improve the quality of the condensed core, some could refine the body. Every medicinal pill had a high price. Xiao Hua had heard of these medicinal pills before, but he didn't expect that he would come across them right after he came out for training. Unfortunately, although he had spirit stones in his space, they didn't seem to be of any use to him. He could only listen to Chang Fian's words on the stage. Xiao Hua didn't have any thoughts of bidding. All right, the bidding for the medicinal pills is over. Now, let's start the bidding for the spirit grasses and spirit fruits. Chang Fian finally shouted. Xiao Hua immediately focused. As usual, the first round of the auction for the spirit grasses is my Weeping Moon City specialty, the Elian green fruit. Chang Fian clapped his hands, and a young female cultivator walked out from the corner. This female cultivator used a strange head ornament to cover her face, making it impossible to see her true appearance. She wore very little, and only a few important parts were covered. The rest of her tender skin was exposed, and under the resplendent brilliance, it revealed a kind of enchanting luster. Xiao Hua's eyes swept over her, and a wave of heat gushed out from the bottom of his heart. Damn it! Xiao Hua immediately recited the exquisite leaf scripture. A faint flow of energy flowed out from the Buddha's saraira. Although it was like a faint autumn wind, it blew away all the beautiful thoughts in Xiao Hua's heart. Should I bid for the spirit grasses? Or should I bid for the body? Xiao Hua cried out in his heart. He looked around. Obviously, the entire atmosphere in the hall was ignited by this female cultivator in an instant. There was a somewhat excited atmosphere. Fellow Taoists, I believe everyone knows that the specialty of Weeping Moon City is the Elian green fruit. However, the quality and age of the Elian green fruit are different. If the difference is too big, then the effects of the clear flower pill and the Elian pill will also be different. As for the Elian green fruit in this auction in my Weeping Moon City, let's not talk about the age. As for the quality, everyone, please take a look. The 100 stalks of Elian green fruit in this female cultivator's storage bag were cultivated by this female cultivator using my Weeping Moon City's secret method. The quality is definitely the best. -8. Chapter 1700. Using primordial yin to cultivate it? Xiao Hua was stunned and thought to himself, it seems that I haven't seen any records that mention such benefits. I believe that some of you are here for the first time in my Weeping Moon City. I still have to explain. Chang Fian continued naturally, as if he had said this countless times. The refinement of pills requires the balance of yin and yang. The bright flower fruit is yang while the Elian green fruit is yin. Because of the power of heaven and earth, my Weeping Moon City is a place where yang energy gathers. The yin energy of heaven and earth has nowhere to go. Therefore, the yin spirit herbs produced here are famous in the entire Xiaoyu continent. The Elian green fruit cultivated with female primordial yin has an even deeper yin energy. It is extremely rare in Weeping Moon City. If it is refined into the bright flower pill, its effect will be 30% stronger than normal pills. The starting price of these 100 Elian green fruits is 20 high-grade spirit stones. Why is it so cheap? This is bad. When Xiao Hua heard that the Elian green fruit cultivated with female primordial yin had so many benefits and the starting price was so low, he couldn't help but feel bad. He thought that there would be many people bidding for it, who knew that after a while, the light screen was still silent and no words appeared. Cough, cough. Chang Fian coughed a few times and smiled. I know that the age of the Elian green fruit is a bit young, but if you buy it and choose a suitable place to cultivate it, fellow Chang, let's forget about it. I'm afraid there aren't any cultivators from the 100 Flower Valley, Mo Ling sect, or Grass Spirit sect here today. No one is interested in your Elian green fruit. Fellow Taoist, please bring out your aged spirit herbs. Finally, a slightly boorish voice rang out, reverberating through the silent hall. That's right, that's right. Everyone also shouted. Sigh, all right. Chang Fian seemed to feel that it was like casting pearls before swine. He shook his head slightly and was about to put away the jade box with a wave of his sleeve. Great. Xiao Hua was overjoyed in his heart. He understood that these spirit grasses that were not very old were of little value to ordinary cultivators. The base price of 120-year-old spirit grasses was 20 high-grade spirit stones, and each of them was 20 medium-grade spirit stones. This price was absolutely not low. Only sects like 100 Herb sect that specialized in growing spirit herbs would pay attention to it and pay such a high price. But these sects really didn't come today. Without hesitation, Xiao Hua waved the wooden stick in his hand, and a line of words appeared on the screen. Number 422, 20 pieces. Haha, the 100 Flowers Valley is here. I wasted my breath. The cultivator's voice rang out again. Well, there's finally an expert who knows what's what. Chang Fian smiled again and said, Fellow Taoist number 422 has given the starting price. Are there any other Taoists who want to bid? If you wanted to bid, you would have done so long ago. Xiao Hua muttered. Sure enough, after a few mutters, no one responded. The 100 stalks of Elysian Lotus Azure fruits in the bag of holding belonged to Xiao Hua. However, Xiao Hua also noticed that the auction in the Weeping Moon City was different from that in the Yinyan City. All the items that were auctioned would not be delivered to the cultivators at the time of the auction. Presumably, The items would only be delivered to the cultivators after the auction. Hee, what if I don't have enough spirit stones and scare them into bidding? What if I can't take out enough spirit stones and sneak away? Xiaohua thought maliciously. Following that, a few more spirit herbs, just like the Elysian lotus azure fruits, were brought up by different female cultivators. They were not very old, but their origins were not ordinary. Presumably, these items would have a good selling point in the previous auctions, so they became the norm. The asking price was not low, but today, they all benefited Xiaohua. In the end, a few people laughed and said, "Fellow Taoist Chong, I'm afraid there's no need to bid for these routine spirit herbs. Let fellow Taoist number 422 take them. It's not very appropriate to waste our time for no reason." Haha, I also think so. Chang Fian did not expect that today's situation would be like this. His face was slightly embarrassed. While he was cursing inwardly, he rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "If fellow Taoist number 422 agrees, I will make the decision to bid for all the low-level spirit herbs to fellow Taoist number 422. Furthermore, I will give fellow Taoist number 422 a 5% discount." Xiaohua laughed loudly in his belly. Without the slightest hesitation, he once again agreed via voice transmission. "Ha ha ha. Fellow Taoist number 422 is really funny." Seeing a line of small words on the light screen, fellow Taoist number 422 agrees. Chang Fian and the other cultivators in the hall all laughed loudly. All right, since fellow Taoist number 422 is so supportive, I can't go back on my words. Chang Fian clapped his hands and said with a smile, "For this auction, the Sobbing Moon City has prepared 440 types of spiritual herbs. Other than the 5 spiritual herbs that fellow Taoist number 422 bid for, there are still 435 types of spiritual herbs left. They will be priced at 8,700 upper-grade spiritual stones. I will remove 10% of the spiritual stones, and fellow Taoist number 422 can bid for these spiritual herbs with 8 supreme-grade spiritual stones." As he said that, he pointed his hand. On the light screen, lines of words flowed and the 435 types of spirit herbs were slowly displayed. Bright flower fruit, origin returning herb, mooning herb, chi chimu. Some of the cultivators who were bored actually read out the names one by one. At the same time, many cultivators roared with laughter. Although there were a lot of spirit herbs, and they could be considered rare, their age was written next to them. Some were 10 years old, some were 20 years old, and the oldest was 30 years old. These were probably not enough to be refined into pills, or they could not be refined into pills of high quality. Pill closing. Among the lines of words, a sharp-eyed cultivator immediately exclaimed, "Fellow Taoist Chong, why is there a pill closing among these low-grade spirit herbs? This pill closing is the item that I want to bid for. No, I want to bid for it." Fellow Taoist, this pill closing is naturally a low-grade spirit herb that is extremely young, right? Can't you see? Chang Fian's eyes flashed with craftiness. He pointed his hand and the words on the light screen stopped. After the words, pill closing, there were words, 5 years, 10 spirit herbs. But the problem is, this pill closing is not limited to its age. It only needs 5 years of pill closing to refine bright flower pills. The other cultivators also shouted, "Moreover, this pill closing is extremely rare. Weeping Moon City is taking out 10 pill closing at once. Each pill closing should be worth at least half a top-grade spirit stone, right? Why are they giving it to Cultivator 422 just like that?" "That's right. No, this is not fair. This pill closing is a separate auction." Everyone shouted. Cough, cough. Chang Fian coughed and sneered. "I represent Weeping Moon City. How can the words of Weeping Moon City not count? Fellow Taoists, I gave you this opportunity. Since you don't want it, how can you blame I for being unfair?" -8. Chapter 1701. When the majority of the cultivators heard this, they were somewhat dissatisfied. However, when they thought about it carefully, the situation was indeed the same. Chang Fian had originally bid for the items one by one. However, Someone in the auction house thought that it was too slow. Thus, they urged him to speed up. Chang Fian also agreed without hesitation. Number 422 didn't hesitate and took out 8 top-grade spirit stones without hesitation. Now that they were tracing back and asking people to relent, there were naturally people who wanted to make things difficult for Chang Fian. But how can there be 450 types of spiritual herbs in a single auction? At the same time, there were many people who were surprised and muttered, and as usual, he should be bidding alone. However, when Chang Fian's cold gaze swept over them, the whole place became calm again, and no one said a word. All right, Chang Fian was very satisfied with the effect of his gaze. Suddenly, he clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Fellow cultivators, don't be afraid. For this auction, my sobbing moon city has prepared many spiritual herbs. Soon, there will be a 400-year-old Elian green fruit, and the starting price will be 1 top-grade spirit stone. All right, I will add 5 mid-grade spirit stones." Before Chang Fian finished speaking, a cultivator shouted, "Haha." The others laughed again, because when this cultivator spoke, a few words had already jumped on the light screen. Number 105 had already raised the price to 1 top-grade spirit stone and 20 mid-grade spirit stones. Damn it! That cultivator touched his head and did not say anything else. He hurriedly activated his magic power and waved the wood. Hee. Seeing that the Elian green fruit was quickly sold for 2.5 high-grade spirit stones, Xiao Hua felt a burst of joy in his heart. To me, 30 years and 300 years are really negligible. With only 8 top-grade spirit stones, I was able to bid for so many spiritual herbs. I didn't come to the auction in vain. Next, there were Elian green fruits of different ages, and finally, there was a 1,300-year-old Elian green fruit. This completely caused the entire auction to boil over. After several rounds of bidding, the words on the light screen changed rapidly, and in the end, it was actually sold at the price of 2 top-grade spirit stones. Although Xiao Hua had already participated in the auction, he was still somewhat flabbergasted as he watched the numbers on the hologram gradually increase. He thought to himself, "It seems that when it comes to the auction, these spirit stones are no longer considered spirit stones. This is a top-grade spirit stone. In the normal market, a 2,000-year-old spiritual herb is only worth 1 top-grade spirit stone, but in the auction, it seems like it's worth twice the price. It seems that I still don't have enough spirit stones in my space." Xiao Hua unconsciously thought of the finale of the auction. I wonder how many spirit stones that treasure is worth? After that, there were some spirit grasses. Most of these spirit grasses didn't exist in Xiao Hua's space, but from their names, most of them were included in the spirit grasses that Xiao Hua had just bid for. Without exception, these spirit grasses were all sold for extremely high prices. Well, if the last treasure is exchanged with a 10,000-year-old spiritual herb, I don't know if it's possible. Xiao Hua's heart was rekindled with hope. After the auction of spiritual herbs, it was the materials for refining tools. There were also many rare and strange things, such as half a drop of Qingfu blood, which was said to be used to practice some kind of mysterious cultivation method, several pieces of spiritual wood, which was said to be used to refine flying swords, and a bottle of heavenly thunder accumulation liquid, which was said to be necessary to refine a thunder attribute magic weapon. These things might not be available in the Weeping Moon City, so the things to be exchanged were also strange, many of which Xiao Hua had never heard of. Just when Xiao Hua was secretly shaking his head and thinking about how to get the spiritual herbs in the auction, he heard Chang Fian's clear voice, "These are 2 pieces of gold foil that a fellow Taoist entrusted to me in the Weeping Moon City. I don't know the purpose of these 2 pieces of gold foil." Gold foil? Xiao Hua was startled and hurriedly looked up. Sure enough, the 2 pieces of gold foil floating in front of Chang Fian looked exactly the same as the gold foil that recorded the exquisite leaf scripture. I don't know the material and purpose of this gold foil. The fellow Taoist who entrusted it also doesn't know, but I believe that this thing is of great use. Chang Fian said very mysteriously, "This fellow Taoist doesn't want spiritual stones or spiritual herbs. He only wants Qianmo stone. No matter how big or small it is, it can be exchanged." Qianmo stone? When Xiao Hua heard this, He felt both disappointed and uneasy. This gold leaf was related to the Buddha Sarira that he cultivated, so he had to gather all of it. Now that his luck was good, how could he not take it when he encountered it in the second auction? He was willing to exchange the 10,000-year-old spiritual herb, but the other party only wanted the Qianmo stone. Xiaohua also knew about the Qianmo stone. It was something similar to the Danhe. When refining tools, one only needed to add a little bit of it, and no matter if it was a magic tool or magic weapon, it would be 2 times harder than when it was not used. It was not rare to say that it was rare, but the problem was that Xiaohua had never seen it before, let alone have it. Could it be that I'm just going to watch it be exchanged by someone else? Xiaohua was a bit anxious, but the situation was out of Xiaohua's expectations. That Changfian shouted a few times, but just like the Elian green fruit, no one answered. Xiaohua was overjoyed. His eyes turned a few times, and he activated the auction wood. On the light screen immediately appeared. Number 422, a piece of top-grade spiritual stone or a 10,000-year-old spiritual herb. Haha, this fellow Taoist is probably a cultivator from 100 Flower Valley or Grass Spirit Sect. When a cultivator saw this, he laughed and said, "Who would exchange spiritual herbs for some gold foil of unknown use?" Changfian looked at it, then pointed his hand. Xiaohua's line of text immediately disappeared. He said, "That fellow Taoist said very clearly, he only wants the Qianmo stone and nothing else." Fellow Taoist Chang. A low voice sounded, "I have the Qianmo stone, but I don't want this gold foil. I want to exchange it for a 10,000-year-old Elian grass, I don't know." Changfian shook his head slightly and said with a smile, "I can't do anything about this. If fellow Taoist is willing, you can reveal your identity, then use the Qianmo stone to exchange for these 2 gold foils. After that, you can exchange it with fellow Taoist number 422 outside. Or you can ask fellow Taoist number 422 to reveal his identity, and you can go find him." Naturally, that voice stopped and did not say another word. Xiaohua also sighed. Even though the gold foil was important, but if he revealed his identity, then the 10,000-year-old Elian grass would not be easy to explain. Sun Shu, Qian Diheng, and Kuren Fian were all present. Damn it! Xiaohua suddenly stood up and pulled down the maze on his body, revealing a pale face with thick eyebrows and big eyes. He said clearly, "I, Jiangamo, happen to have a 10,000-year-old Elian grass on me. If fellow Taoist is willing, you can exchange these gold foils. I will respectfully wait for fellow Taoist outside." Seeing Xiaohua reveal his identity, the people present whispered to each other. A 10,000-year-old Elian grass, that was a spiritual grass needed by late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators. He actually used it to exchange for the Qianmo stone. Could it be that these 2 gold foils had some secret? But what made Xiaohua disappointed was that the cultivator who spoke just now did not speak again, and he also could not figure out who it was. Looking at the eyes of the surrounding people looking at him, Xiaohua felt rather ashamed and angry in his heart, as if he had been played by that person. "All right, fellow Taoist Jiang, please sit down." Changfian waved his hand and said, 9 out of 10 things in this world do not go as you wish. Even though these gold foils are something you must obtain, you do not have the Qianmo stone, and this fellow Taoist obviously has his misgivings. It's better to ask fellow Taoist Jiang to find another opportunity in the future. As he said that, he waved his hand, and the 2 gold foils landed on an empty plate in midair, falling into a corner and disappearing. Sigh. Xiaohua sighed and sat down, simply not wearing his camouflage robe anymore. Immediately after, Changfian took out many more items, bidding one by one. Xiaohua lost interest, only watching indifferently. In the end, after bidding for several mystic tools, Changfian waved his hand and said with a smile, "The finale of this auction is a special item. Fellow Taoist Chang, isn't it a magic weapon?" An impatient cultivator already shouted, "Hee, this item is not a magic weapon, but it's better than a magic weapon." Changfian smiled and clapped his hand. A similarly charming female cultivator with her face covered, holding a jade plate in her hand, walked up to the high platform. When the female cultivator walked in front of Changfian under everyone's anxious mood, Changfian took the jade plate and said with a smile, I wonder if fellow Taoists have guessed what it is? Seeing Chang Fian showing off, everyone shook their heads. There were indeed too many strange things in Xiaoyu continent. Who could know what was under this brocade? Hee, everyone, please take a look. Chang Fian waved his hand, and the brocade floated up. On the jade plate, there was a small, clear, azure sword quietly lying on it. It looked extremely ordinary. A flying sword? Seeing this item, some cultivators revealed expressions of joy while others frowned. Not bad. Fellow Taoists are indeed considerate. This is a flying sword. Chang Fian waved his hand, and the azure flying sword flew into his hand. He looked at the small sword in his hand with pity and waved his hand. The flying sword flew into the air and freely swam around the high platform. This is a real flying sword, something that sword cultivators use. Chang Fian used the art of controlling objects for a moment and said with satisfaction, "Although I don't know the art of flying swords, I can sense the sharpness and spirituality of this flying sword just by using the Dharma instruments method to activate it. If any fellow Taoist is proficient in flying sword techniques and lacks a flying sword, wouldn't this spirituality of a flying sword be even better than a magic treasure?" The spirituality of a flying sword. Xiao Hua's heart jumped, and he immediately understood what Chang Fian meant. This flying sword clearly had a sword spirit. It was many times stronger than his dream execution. How many spirit stones would this cost? Xiao Hua frowned and began to calculate how he could bid for this flying sword. Fellow Taoist Chang, a sword cultivator's flying sword is connected to the sword cultivator's life. If the previous owner of this flying sword did not die, it would not be easy to refine, right? Fellow Taoist Chang, I heard that 2 sword cultivators from Huan country went missing in Ming country. Could this flying sword be related to those 2 sword cultivators? Fellow Taoist Chang, a group of cultivators began to ask. -8. Chapter 1702. Fellow Taoists. Chang Fian clapped his hands and said in a clear voice, "Although flying swords are rarely seen in my Tao sex auction, it's not like they have never been seen before. Of course, with I's experience, this is also the first time I've seen a flying sword of such high quality. Therefore, when my sobbing moon city said that we have something comparable to a magic weapon for auction, I've indeed caused you to misunderstand." Fellow Taoist Chang. There was still someone who said loudly, "All magic tools and magic treasures either have a common refining method, or a special refining method is provided during the bidding. This flying sword is certainly good, but I'm afraid we don't have a sword cultivator's magic formula." Chang Fian was somewhat unhappy that he was interrupted, but he still narrowed his eyes and said, "Fellow Taoist, please rest assured. I haven't finished speaking yet. This flying sword has already been restricted by a secret method, and there is a corresponding refining jade slip." Great. Xiao Hua's mouth revealed a slight smile. This flying sword was simply tailor-made for him. "I just don't know how to bid." Xiao Hua's heartbeat quickened. Sure enough, someone shouted, "Fellow Taoist Chang, what's the starting price of this flying sword? Hurry up and report it. We can't wait any longer." Haha, everyone, please wait a moment. As Chang Fian spoke, he stretched out his hand and was about to point at the light screen. However, at this moment, Chang Fian suddenly felt the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in front of him move slightly. At the same time, the flying sword that had stopped in front of him suddenly straightened its sword head. As if it had intelligence, it swayed slightly and suddenly flew towards the crowd of cultivators in front of him. Who? Chang Fian was slightly surprised, but his expression didn't seem to be too surprised. Chang Fian pointed his finger, and the flying sword stopped in midair like a small snake that had its weak point pointed. However, this pause only lasted for a moment. Suddenly, the flying sword more than doubled in size. With a schwa sound, it turned into a green rainbow and was about to fly into the crowd of cultivators. Just as the flying sword was about to cross the range of the high platform, there was a burst of light and a finger-wide yellow light screen blocked the flying sword. The flying sword was blocked by the flickering light of the light screen, and the intelligence of the flying sword seemed to be sucked away. With a clang sound, the flying sword fell onto the high platform. Oomph! A bunch of hypocrites. Suddenly, a shout came from the crowd of cultivators. Shortly after, a school of light that looked like a school of fish rose up from the shout and charged toward the light barrier. There was a burst of crackling sounds. The restriction on the platform was clearly no match for the light from the fish and was shattered. Shortly after, another ray of rainbow shot out from where the fish flew out and landed on the green flying sword. The green flying sword seemed like it was being held by a hand and was about to leave the platform as the rainbow shrank. Flying sword. Xiao Hua's eyes were sharp, and he had also practiced with flying swords. With a glance, he could tell that these two strange and sharp lights were two flying swords. Chang Fian's eyes flashed with a hint of gloominess. He formed a series of hand seals and struck at the two flying swords. However, all the hand seals were useless. It seemed that they could not prevent the flying swords from being taken away. However, Chang Fian did not look nervous at all. Where did this madman come from? A light snort came from the top of the high platform. Immediately, a green full moon-shaped ball of light flashed from where the sound came from. The ball of light streaked across the high platform and smashed into the rainbow sword. There was a crisp "pa" sound, followed by a sword cry from Ningguang. The rainbow sword seemed to be in pain and cried out sadly. The green flying sword naturally fell again. Go! Two people flew out from the crowd of cultivators. These two people had already torn off their camouflage clothing, revealing the foreign sword cultivator attire. They were Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao, who came to the 3 cultivation countries to find Zhang Yutong and Zhang Yuhe. When Duan Yuming saw that Wang Shuyao's rainbow sword was hit, he was not nervous at all. He chanted a mantra, and the swimming fish sword flew out. One of them hit the green ball of light, and the other went to catch the green flying sword. Ignorant child. With a sneer, the green ball of light flickered and suddenly exploded. In the space of 1 zhang above the high platform, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was torn apart. Wang Shuyao's rainbow sword shook violently. Then, it turned into a rainbow and returned to Wang Shuyao's side. With a spin, it protected Wang Shuyao within the rainbow. Duan Yuming's swimming fish sword was even more miserable. Both of the fishes were blown away. It was extremely chaotic. Even the fishes that were transformed from the sword light suddenly disappeared, leaving only empty outlines. Duan Yuming, who was flying in the air, paled. He knew that he had encountered an expert. He activated the sword energy in his body and slowly withdrew his swimming fish sword. He then bowed and said, I wonder which senior from the Weeping Moon City has come? From the time the 2 sword cultivators from the Xin sword sect attacked to the expert from the Weeping Moon City stopping them, only a few breaths of time had passed. In the auction, the cultivators' cultivation levels were uneven. Many of the chi refining cultivators did not even have time to react before everything was over. Although the exploding ball of light was extremely powerful, its power was controlled within 1 zhang. Even under the ball of light, the 10 cultivators on the side of the high platform did not even have a single strand of hair on their heads. Of course, among these 10 cultivators, there were 2 low-level chi refining cultivators. Although they were wearing camouflage robes, their faces were already pale. They thought that they had just walked through the gates of hell. Senior, seeing that the 2 sword cultivators from the Xin sword sect had such a high cultivation level, they were afraid that they were already in the golden core stage. Naturally, the cultivators who called them seniors were also in the nascent soul stage. Many of the cultivators who had regained their senses during the auction thought, could it be Fairy Chiyu? However, Chang Fian was unusually respectful. He bowed towards the high platform and said, Junior greets Elder Hua. Elder Hua? A cultivator beside Xiao Hua whispered, Elder Hua Jinyu? It's actually not Fairy Chiyu. Humph. Elder Hua is already in the late stage of the golden core stage. It's more than enough to deal with these 2 sword cultivators. How could the Chiyu city lord appear? It was probably because the restrictions on the high platform were damaged. The restrictions on the seats during the auction were also damaged. Everyone's whispers could be heard clearly now. Seeing an old woman in green slowly stepping down from the high platform, Duan Yuming's eyes flickered. He bowed and said, Junior Duan Yuming greets Elder Hua of the Chiyu city. Humph. Although Hua Jinyu did not release her qi, her aura was oppressive. With Xiao Hua's cultivation level, he could not see her cultivation level for the time being. However, the late stage of the Golden Core stage was even more powerful than Zhen Qing. Xiao Hua could not help but respect her. You are sword cultivators from the Huan country. You came to my Chiyu city to participate in the auction. Why did you break my rules? Although you are guests from afar, I still have to warn you. Hua Jinyu landed from the sky and looked at Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao expressionlessly. -8. Chapter 1703. I'm Duan Yuming. This is my junior sister, Wang Shuyao. Duan Yuming bowed and said, I was reckless just now. Please forgive me. Senior Hua. Hua Jinyu's eyes flickered. She did not expect the two sword cultivators to be so humble. She nodded slightly and said, Yes, I'm the elder of Chiyu City, Hua Jinyu. Although the realm of sword cultivators is different from that of Dao Sect, your cultivation is similar to that of Dao Sect's middle Golden Core stage. You don't have to call me senior, just call me fellow cultivator. Thank you, fellow cultivator Hua. Duan Yuming understood that Hua Jinyu's cultivation level was very high. He already knew that Hua Jinyu had reached the Aurous Core realm when he tried to probe Hua Jinyu. Once he broke through the bottleneck, he would be a nascent soul senior. All right, since both of you know your mistake, Chiyu City has always been hospitable. You just have to follow the rules of the auction. I'll pretend that I didn't see anything that happened just now. Hua Jinyu nodded and said, Do you think it's that easy? Xiao Hua, who was at the back of the crowd, narrowed his eyes. He had already thought about the cause and effect and said coldly in his heart. Sure enough, Duan Yuming laughed and said, We naturally want to follow the rules of Chiyu City, but we also want to follow the rules of the three cultivation kingdoms. But there's nothing we can do. Someone tried to kill my sword cultivator, so I have to violate the rules of Chiyu City. What do you mean by that? Hua Jinyu sneered. I know that you've been looking for two sword cultivators for many years without any results. Are you suspecting that these two sword cultivators are from Chiyu City? Wang Shuyao also said coldly, We didn't say that. If fellow cultivator Hua admits it yourself, we can also think so. Junior sister, Duan Yuming scolded, if Chiyu City did it, would fellow cultivator Hua treat us so kindly? They dare. Wang Shuyao glanced at them and said coldly, Why wouldn't I dare? The moment Hua Jinyu released his pressure, it was as if a mountain was pressing down on them. Wang Shuyao and Duan Yuming's expressions changed instantly. After their bodies sank down by 3 feet, there was the sound of swords ringing around their bodies. The flying swords circled around the two of them rapidly. The sword ray shot out fiercely and actually managed to resist the pressure of a late-stage Aurous Core. Although Hua Jinyu controlled his aura very well, all the cultivators present could still feel it. Even Xiao Hua, who was the last, felt an incomparable fear from the bottom of his heart. It was like an irresistible pressure. When Xiao Hua saw Wang Shuyao and Duan Yuming's methods of dealing with them, his eyes unconsciously lit up. His current strength was roughly at the early stage of foundation establishment, but if he were to fight with a foundation establishment cultivator, he would be lacking in coercion. And this coercion was very annoying. Without the realm of foundation establishment, it simply wouldn't be produced. If he could use his flying sword to resist the coercion of a foundation establishment cultivator, he wouldn't need to reveal his mighty Vajra Dharma body. This would be an excellent method. But right after, Xiao Hua frowned slightly again and said to himself, using the flying sword to resist the pressure, it's probably because of the sword spirit within the flying sword. This young master's flying sword doesn't have a sword spirit, so how can it be used? It's better to find an opportunity to try it out. Fellow Taoist Hua, don't be anxious. I have something to say. Duan Yuming saw that Hua Jinyu's coercion was blocked. He raised his head and shouted, Humph. Hua Jinyu snorted coldly and retracted his coercion. Fellow Taoist Hua, don't you think that my actions have something to do with this flying sword? Duan Yuming glanced at the flying sword in Chang Fian's hand and said, This flying sword is one of the 2 missing sword cultivators of my Xin sword sect. Zhang Yutong's flying sword, green spirit. Is it? Hua Jinyu glanced at Duan Yuming, and with a wave of her hand, the green spirit flying sword flew into her hand. She looked at it for a while and said, "This flying sword's material is indeed extraordinary. It's different from ordinary flying swords. But if you say that this is Zhang Yutong's flying sword, I will need you to show evidence." This green spirit flying sword was nurtured by my Xian sword sect's secret technique. Although I can't completely control the sword, I can still use my sect's secret technique to drive the sword. Wang Shuyao said, "The fact that I was able to take down this sword is the evidence. Is that so?" Hua Jinyu smiled. Then, she clasped her hands together, and the green spirit flying sword in her hand flickered, and there seemed to be a cracking sound. "Fellow Taoist Hua, please wait." Duan Yuming's expression changed, and he hurriedly shouted, "If you use your technique, this green spirit flying sword will be subdued, but the information of my sect's disciple will also be lost. I'm afraid that it will be detrimental to the search for the missing disciple." "Haha, since I can subdue it, does that mean that this flying sword belongs to Weeping Moon City?" Hua Jianyu laughed and let go of the flying sword. "Fellow Taoist, you're twisting words and forcing logic." Wang Shuyao said anxiously, "It seems like fellow Taoist Wang is twisting words and forcing logic too." Hua Jinyu smiled. "Since Weeping Moon City has no idea about the origin of this flying sword, why would there be a cultivator with such a high cultivation level like fellow Taoist Hua in charge of the auction? There wasn't a single cultivator in the middle stage of the Golden Core realm in the auction, right?" Wang Shuyao rebuked without hesitation. Hua Jinyu shook his head. "Fellow Taoist Wang is wrong. I'm afraid that there are 2 middle-stage Golden Core realm cultivators in this auction. Moreover, if it weren't for me, how would such a thing happen? Wouldn't the reputation and face of Weeping Moon City be trampled on?" "Junior sister, let's not talk about this anymore." Duan Yuming frowned slightly and cupped his hands towards Hua Jinyu. "I just have 2 questions. Please speak. Firstly, I would like to ask, where did Weeping Moon City get this green spirit flying sword? Secondly, I would like to take back this green spirit flying sword. I wonder if Weeping Moon City would let it go." Hua Jinyu squinted his eyes and looked at the green spirit flying sword in his hand and smiled. "Whether this flying sword is the green spirit that you're talking about is another matter. Moreover, Weeping Moon City has always kept the origin of the flying sword a secret for other fellow Taoists. However, since this concerns the lives of 2 sword cultivators, I'll make the decision on behalf of the City Lord of Weeping Moon City. I'll let Chang Fian explain everything to fellow Taoist Duan in detail." "Thank you very much." Duan Yuming's face was filled with joy, and he cupped his hands in thanks. "Senior Duan." Chang Fian smiled bitterly and said, "It's very simple. A month ago, a 10th layer Qi refining cultivator came to Weeping Moon City's auction. This cultivator's appearance was very ordinary, and there was nothing special about him. Naturally, I hope Senior Duan can forgive this cultivator's appearance. I can't and I don't dare to hand it over to you. Otherwise, the reputation of Weeping Moon City that has been built for thousands of years will be ruined." Duan Yuming's face was a little gloomy. He squinted his eyes and said nothing. Chang Fian continued, "That cultivator brought this flying sword out, saying that he found it somewhere and wanted to sell it to Weeping Moon City. Of course, Weeping Moon City also knew about the disappearance of your disciples. At that time, we also asked about it. However, Senior Duan, think about it. This cultivator is only at the 10th layer Qi refining realm. He can't possibly be a match for the Foundation Establishment female sword cultivator that Senior mentioned, can he? Moreover, Weeping Moon City's auction also requires us to earn spiritual stones. There's no reason for us not to take this business that's delivered to our doorstep, right? So, Weeping Moon City took this flying sword away, using it for the auction today?" Wang Shuyao sneered. "Yes, it's exactly as Senior Wang said." Chang Fian nodded and said sincerely, "At that time, the disciples of Weeping Moon City even advised that cultivator to sell it on consignment. That way, Weeping Moon City would only take a few spiritual stones, and most of the profit would still go to that cultivator. However, the cultivator had to go on an adventure and didn't have the time to wait for a month. Therefore, the disciples of Weeping Moon City could only buy this flying sword at a high price and then bid for it here. Actually, Weeping Moon City was taking a huge risk by doing this. If no one bid for it, this flying sword would be destroyed in the hands of Weeping Moon City, like the previous item that no one bid for it. Weeping Moon City is indeed benevolent and righteous. Wang Shuyao couldn't help but sneer again. That's right. Weeping Moon City has always been a city of integrity. Fellow cultivators, you have all come to bid for it because of Weeping Moon City's integrity. If not for that, I wouldn't have dared to speak so confidently here. Chang Fian said seriously. Forget it. Duan Yuming waved his hand and said, I, a sword cultivator, also bid. So I understand the rules of this auction. Since fellow Taoist can't say more, then give this green spirit flying sword to my Shin Sword sect. I won't pursue the negligence of your city. Hee, Senior Duan, this is an auction. Weeping Moon City used a large amount of spiritual stones to exchange for this flying sword. If you want to get this flying sword, I'm afraid you'll have to pay a certain price. Chang Fian glanced at Hua Jianyu and said in a tone that was neither arrogant nor humble, since this is Shin Sword Sect's flying sword, why do we still have to pay spiritual stones? Wang Shuyao was furious. Chang Fian smiled apologetically. It seems, Senior, you can't prove that this flying sword belongs to your sect, right? How many spiritual stones? Duan Yuming's face was so gloomy that it looked like black water was about to drip down. Fellow Taoists, this humble Taoist apologizes to you on behalf of my city. Chang Fian didn't directly say anything to Duan Yuming. Instead, he turned around and bowed to the crowd. He said sincerely, this item is related to the disappearance of Huan Country's sword cultivators. I have no choice but to delay everyone's bidding and sell this flying sword to the sword cultivator senior who came from afar. The crowd of cultivators applauded and praised. Fellow cultivator Chang, your Weeping Moon City is really benevolent. Forget it, since there are sword cultivators here, we'll give them some leeway. Naturally, there were also cultivators who weren't happy. Since it's an auction, then let's see who can offer more spiritual stones. I also want this flying sword. If the sword cultivator can't offer enough spiritual stones, I will take this flying sword. Looking coldly at Chang Fian's performance, Duan Yuming asked again in a deep voice, how many spiritual stones does this flying sword cost? Not much, not much. Chang Fian smiled and reported a number. This much? Wang Shuyao exclaimed. This is enough to bid for a treasure. That's right. The price of this flying sword is already that of a treasure. Chang Fian smiled and said, moreover, this is the spiritual stones that my Weeping Moon City paid for the flying sword from that cultivator. I definitely didn't add a single extra spiritual stone. Then, Chang Fian glanced at Hua Jinyu and smiled. Of course, if the two seniors don't have enough spiritual stones, you can also exchange your flying swords for it. How dare you? Wang Shuyao was furious. A rainbow flew out from her side. -8. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.